What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app and or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, it's Bills Dolphins week, which has gained more importance these past several years and a lot more last year when the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill and that whole crew really started to arrive. They look tremendous this year. The Bills have started to turn things around after a disappointing week 1 loss to the Jets, and it has culminated in it's early in the year, first quarter of the season, but what it's culminated into an important week 4 matchup in terms of AFC standings for the Bills, AFC East standings, with them already having a division loss under their belt versus the Jets. And this game just really presents a lot of important pieces from a general standpoint, but a lot of intriguing ones from a schematic standpoint in this episode in terms of the X's and O's for the Bills and Dolphins, how they match up with one another, and what will really decide that game. And that's what we're going to dive into in the first portion of this episode. The back end of the episode, as is tradition here on the show, will be stock up and stock down for the Bills coming out of their week 3 victory versus the Commanders. We'll dive into some game tape and break down some things towards the back end of that episode. But without further ado, I bring in my guest for this episode, Mr. JP Acosta, writer for SB Nation, and who I told offline, and I'll say it again now, is genuinely one of my favorite follows on Twitter. You know ball, you geek out and you nerd out for a lot of the same things that I geek out and nerd out with. So 1, I enjoy your presence. 2, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. Thanks for stopping by.
No problem, man. This has been you've been one of my favorite follows, go-to for Bills coverage. You are one of my favorites when it comes to the landscape of knowing ball and talking anime and pro wrestling. It's just super fun always interacting with you. So I'm excited to hop on.
I appreciate you. That's very kind. It's important, I think, like when you're like the guest, to like butter up the host. So whether you're telling the truth or lying, I appreciate the hell out of you for being so kind to me. Thank you so much. Let's start with some general overall thoughts. Bills Dolphins, you do a great job covering the entire landscape of the NFL, and what attracted me to you in the first place is I gravitate towards, whether it's writers or shows, people who break down things from a schematic standpoint, the X's and O's, the real, like the nitty gritty, the bones and the structure and the scheme and all those pieces that really decide the matchups and the science of football. And you're great at doing that. You watch a ton of tape, you write about the league, obviously. So I was pumped to get your, overall high level perspective. And let's start with that piece. Coming into this game, Bills Dolphins, like I mentioned in the intro, Miami's riding high. They absolutely murked the Broncos this past week in what was just like, I didn't even enjoy watching the tape because it was just like so bad for Denver. I felt like I was watching a snuff film at certain points. The Bills have turned it around a bit, but when you're looking at this game from a high level standpoint, Bills Dolphins, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is there something that immediately like kind of turns on the light bulb for you, or is there like a couple little pieces? Like, where's your mind at from a high level perspective when it comes to this game?
So yeah, of course, coming from the top down as kind of a bird's eye view as a general viewer of the NFL, I think the first thing that I always gravitate towards is the offensive and defensive lines. I think because I used to play defensive line, that's always where I'm going to go to. And this is ultimately where games are won. And I think it's not going to be any different for the Bills' interior defensive line against the Dolphins' interior offensive line. Mm-hmm. That's ultimately where this game is going to be won. Against the Broncos, of course, you said you pretty much nailed it. Every time it felt like the Dolphins, I was watching back the replay, and it felt like every 3 plays Kevin Harlan was saying, insert Dolphins player here, wide open over the middle, or insert Dolphins player here, big run. It just felt like every time. It felt like you were watching a boxing match where the underdog is very clearly just not ready for whatever the big guy was throwing at him. Haymakers left and right, and it was over in the first quarter. I'm really intrigued by this matchup of the Dolphins' interior offensive line against the Bills' interior defensive line. The Dolphins have kind of retooled that middle 3 area. They went out and got Isaiah Wynn. They went out and re-signed Connor Williams. He's had a little bit of issues with the snap. in the early parts of the season. But one way that I think Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins offense has kind of masked the deficiencies along the offensive line, just in terms of sheer talent, is using misdirection and motion. You saw it perfectly as soon as they got back Devin A-Chain and Teron Armstead. That's exactly what the Dolphins' run game wants to be. They want to use misdirection combined with that speed and Teron Armstead kind of being Miami's version of Trent Williams, with how Mike McDaniel is Trent Williams in San Francisco, getting him out in space. The big A-chain run. Teron Armstead was pulling and wrapping around in the space, and you got him one-on-one with a DB. One thing that I've always thought was very interesting about the Bills, especially under Sean McDermott, is they, by design, they play the run in light boxes. I've always said Teron Johnson is one of my favorite players in the league because he's like 190 pounds, but he's just throwing his body at 250-pound tight ends. And that's going to play a big role in this game, especially with all the motion that the Dolphins use. I wonder how McDermott is going to keep Teron Johnson out of that motion conflict, because what I noticed against the Commanders is when the Commanders would motion into their run game, you would either bump Teron Johnson into the box or out of the box and create favorable numbers that way. You know, they're going to play light. Teron Johnson's going to be involved in the run action, but that's just going to be something that they have to account for in the run game. I think in the passing game, Ed Oliver's been fantastic to start this year, and I think he's going to have a huge game against the Dolphins. I think the best way to pressure Tua Tagovailoa is up front, up through the middle. I think he's shown the ability to evade pressure on the outside, on the edges of the defense, you know, with edge rushers coming free off the edge. I think the best way to disrupt all the middle of the field passing is get a hand up, get in his face up front immediately. And that way you pressure him either rolling out of the pocket where you can use speed to track him down, or force him into a lower percentage throw on the outside edges of the field. That's really what you want to do. You can't necessarily completely take this offense to a complete halt. But what you want to do is take away their most efficient passes over the middle of the field. The Patriots kind of did it. It wasn't as effective, but they forced them to go away from the middle of the field. They forced them to go to the edges, and the result was 24 points, which compared to the other 2 weeks that the Dolphins have played, that seems like one of the lowest games they've played. So that's really going to be one of the big points here in Dolphins Bills, the interior offensive line against the Bills' interior defensive line.
I love it. Just there's so much to unpack from what you said. Like that's you made so many great points. I love the piece you mentioned with Taron Johnson for the Bills. Like my favorite thing when we're talking about him is he's like a nickel corner who doesn't realize he's a nickel corner. Like he plays like he's Jawan Bentley from the Patriots. Like he's just like, no, I'm just going to be like a heat-seeking missile and like fit. Like he'll fit the run versus like pulling tight ends and pulling guards, and he'll like box in as if he's 245, 250. Like he does not care. And early in his career, it led to him kind of having injury concerns, but fingers crossed and no jinx here. He's really kind of like stemmed that these past several years. And in today's NFL, I did an episode last offseason about how important the nickel position is. I just think like, especially those dudes who can do it all from like a run and pass perspective, the Taron Johnsons, the Mike Hiltons. I love Kenny Moore with the Colts. Like you get those dudes who can fit against the run, but then can function in man and zone in the pass game. And it allows you to stay in that nickel perspective or stay with those light boxes because you can match that way. And the Bills have gotten dinged for it at times by a lot of the fan base being like, well, this is a run heavy week. How come they're staying in nickel, yada, yada. And it's because Taron Johnson can play the run like a linebacker, despite the fact that he is not linebacker size. And he's having another phenomenal year. I love a lot of the points you brought up. And I think that's a great way to lead us into this, starting this whole conversation here. And so for the viewers here on the show, you folks know how we do. We're going to go through the matchups. JP and I are each going to go back and forth. He does not know my answers. I do not know his. We're each going to alternate, comment on each other's matchup pieces, and dive into it and just have a good organic conversation, talking ball and going back and forth. For those of you watching live and playing with us at home, feel free to comment on each of our matchups in the comments there. Feel free to let us know what your top matchups are, what you'll be watching for. I'll star everything and go through as much as I can and then bring it through and bring it up towards the back end of the show, as we always like to make everything as engaging here on the show as possible. All right, JP, you are the guest. So I'm going to let you go first here. You can start. I don't know if you ranked them like 1 through 3 or 3 through 1. You can lead off whichever way you choose. The floor is yours. What is your first or third, whatever you want to lead off with, matchup piece that will decide Bills versus Dolphins here
Yeah.
in week 4.
Yeah. So I actually kind of hinted at it at the beginning. It's the offensive line, defensive line up front. That is where the game is going to be won. One thing that I've really liked about how Sean McDermott has called the defense early is you can still see the bones and the foundation of the Bills defense is the same. A lot of quarters, quarter, half. That stuff hasn't changed. But what I've loved is Sean McDermott has not been afraid of showing pressure and sending pressure. They played a lot of cover 3 against the Commanders. I thought that was kind of new from a Bills defense, and it kind of makes sense with where Sean McDermott comes from and the Carolina Panthers. It makes sense when you think about going back like that. But I do wonder how much pressure they're going to send because Tua has been really good against the blitz. And it's not because he's hitting teams with haymakers, throwing the ball downfield. It's just he's so smart and can throw the ball with anticipation where if you send a blitz from depth, he's going to see it and they're going to run a guy right behind you. And then they're running for 15 yards. So I wonder, does Sean McDermott send pressure or does he rely on that front 4 to win their individual matchups? Ed Oliver is going to be huge in this game. I think he has to play a great game. Leonard Floyd has actually led the Bills in pressures through the first 3 games of the season. I think he's going to have a favorable matchup against Austin Jackson, who's played well to start this season. But, you're always wondering when that levee is going to break. But the offensive line and defensive line, especially up the middle of the defense, the bones of that defense right there, Ed Oliver, you think about guys like Jordan Phillips in the run game against guys like Robert Hunt, Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams. Those guys are going to basically decide this game, especially with how effective the Dolphins were in the run game last week. They want to try and continue that. And that's going to be something that you have to try and stop, or else this game is going to be over.
It's funny that ties into a couple of my points here. So I like that we're kind of on the same page already. That's such a great point too. I think, Aaron Donald's like a unicorn, but Aaron Donald really started to open up the world of what dominant interior pressure can look like. And then it was and then you started to get more, and it was oh, there's Aaron Donald, and oh, there's Chris Jones, and oh, there's Jeffrey Simmons, and oh, there's Jonathan Allen. And those interior dudes who can really cause chaos and disrupt the interior of the pocket and cause problems from a depth perspective of the pocket for quarterbacks. They've gotten paid handsomely. Ed Oliver got rewarded with a contract this offseason. And it really came at a point where, Tremaine Edmonds had been lost. And this was a conversation for a lot of fans we paid Ed, but we didn't pay Edmonds. Fans were conflicted on what they wanted to see between those two. And the contract that Ed got, when he's flashed big time, and he looks every bit like the top 10 pick that he was. But then there's times where you forget that he's even played. And so when he got that contract, it was kind of polarizing for the fan base, but he has started this year and just been an absolute force on the interior, like you said. And, I love that piece just with Leonard Floyd as well. And the Bills front has done a good job, getting pressure. They don't blitz a lot. They've worked in more pressure looks under Sean McDermott, which is a great call from you. McDermott comes from, he cut his teeth with that Jim Johnson Eagles defense back in the day and then went to Carolina. So he wants to rush 4, but he loves to bring simulated pressures and creeper pressures. And when he brings a 5 and a 6 man, it usually gets home by design. But to your point, how does that work? Because if you don't get home on Tua and you have blitzed, now you have less guys in coverage against the route distribution, which means more space for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, or if he dumps it down to Mostert or Devin A-Chain and they take off, there's so much more space for these speedy dudes just to work. And a couple stats here that go along with some of your points. So per PFF, there's 234 qualifying edges and defensive tackles when it comes to pass rush productivity. So again, 234. The Bills have 6 players in the top 60 and 4 in the top 25 for pass rush productivity. For those who don't know, pass rush productivity, instead of just an overall volume standpoint for your pressures, it factors in your snap count, and it'll take pressures, QB hits, hurries, sacks, and then puts it all together with how many times you rush the quarterback. So it's more of an efficiency metric. Again, the Bills have 6 players in the top 60, 4 in the top 25. Leonard Floyd is 9th. Ed Oliver is 19th. Daquan Jones is 20th. Jordan Phillips is 23rd. Greg Rousseau is 36th. And AJ Epinesa is tied for 56th. And then if you whittle those down to just interior players or just edge players, obviously those players climb up. And one more piece, because you mentioned that blitz piece for Tua. So I looked this up earlier for notes for the show. So Tua versus 5 or more rushers this season. There's 35 qualifying quarterbacks. Okay. He's second in QB in quarterback rating. He's second in total EPA. He's tied for first in touchdown percentage, 7th in total attempts, 6th in yards per game. He has the 7th lowest pressure percentage at 33.3. He's 6th in on-target throw percentage. And then the bigger one, 0 interceptions and 0 sacks. When teams are blitzing, he's still decently staying in rhythm. He's thrown with anticipation so much this year, and he's got that ability to just really gouge you when you bring pressure. If you are the Bills, if you are Sean McDermott, are you relying on your front four in this game, or are you going to try and send a little more pressure, or do you want to just, throw simulators and creepers at him because it's still just a 4-man rush? What would be your rush plan when you're attacking Tua?
So I think for me, philosophically, I've never been much of I'm going to sit back and let my front four win. I'm always think I want to try and speed you up. I want to try and force the issue. And that's something I think you have to do with this Dolphins offense. You cannot let them pick you apart and get into a rhythm, because when they get into a rhythm, they're impossible to stop. I think you have to try and force the issue at least early, try and force them into making those decisions just a little bit quicker, or forcing Tua to hold the ball a little bit longer. Try and not even just, like you said, Sean McDermott has done such a good job of not only sending pressure, but showing pressure looks and then dropping out of it. And that's something I think is going to be huge in this game, trying to force Tua to hold onto the ball a little longer. Try and buy as much time for that pass rush as possible. And it's really, that's the big thing. Offenses have kind of in the larger landscape of the NFL, they've had the first punch, with all the Shanahan wide zone, play action, RPO stuff. Now defenses are starting to punch back. I feel like they're starting to get a little bit beefier up front. They're starting to negate those zone runs. And I think this is kind of the game that's going to be a very, very big reflection of where the NFL is going to go, because this team, the Dolphins, they want to live in that middle of the field where they can threaten you with speed vertically and then get underneath you with that speed. And then it's up to you to try and make the tackle on those guys. And good luck with that. So I really do think you have to try and force the issue, try and speed up the process, try and change the picture a little bit.
I love that point, and also a good point too with like how that Dolphins offense works. Like they're so good at pulling coverage players and then running someone in behind it, or just like a basic high-low, like someone sits down and the second level defenders are like, oh, here we go. And it's like, nope, there's a bender coming around behind it and you just opened up all that space, or vice versa. Think of it as like a basic dagger concept. Like Hill just runs that vertical out of the slot and pulls defenders with him. And here comes the dig behind him. And there's like a 15-yard radius and nobody around. And I mean, you saw it on the first touchdown, the Tyreek Hill touchdown against the Broncos. Robbie Chosen runs that in from the opposite side, and that backside safety comes poaching down and he's ready to like jump on it. And then Hill literally comes and runs the post behind it, and Tua just waits and he chucks it down. The other safety isn't even in the picture, and that's on the wide angle all 22 sideline. You can't even see. I think they're in cover 6 because that other safety was dropped into the deep half on the other side of the field, and which makes sense how that backside safety came down on Robbie. Like they can just make you pay in so many forms and fashions. And, I like the idea that you got there. Like just try and heat up Tua. Can you add some beats to his rhythm, to his drop back? Because right now and this is a credit to him and McDaniel, he just seems so comfortable. Like he's dropping back and he's in rhythm. His progressions are in perfect, like succinct steps with his footwork. Like he's just firing on all cylinders. And it's reflected too in his time to throw, per next gen stats, his average time to throw, this is 2.34 seconds. That's the lowest in the league. That's nuts. I remember, was it a couple years ago at Roethlisberger's last year when his average time was like 2.5?
Yeah, everybody was like, oh my God, he's just getting the ball out so quickly. And Tua's like 0.2 of a second quicker than that, but his average depth of target is like 8 yards, or It's so many. They're breaking every rule, and I think the coolest thing about how Mike McDaniel structured this offense is they blend everything together. Nothing is just a collection of. It's not just a collection of plays. It's not just, hey, we're gonna run this cool shit. It's all the stuff builds together. I think about the Patriots game where they do that little out motion that they've started to do now, where it's kind of building onto that slide flat RPO, but now instead of bringing Tyreek Hill all the way across, you're basically just arena footballing him and just giving a little burst motion back outside. It's basically arena football within the constraints of NFL rules. But what that does is you already are threatened with the threat of that speed. So you have to play 15 yards off. I think the Broncos touchdown is a great example. The safety isn't even in the play because he's 40 yards downfield because you're afraid of getting beat over the top by that speed, and they can just run underneath you. And that's all they're going to do. They're going to get that burst motion, and it's the play against the Chargers. You get the burst, Tyreek Hill comes in with the dagger, and he's got a wide lane. The spacing's already perfect, but they build off of that. You run that out motion against the Patriots, and you throw a screen to Jalen Waddle that goes for 20 yards because you're so worried about Tyreek Hill's threat of motion. You run that little out motion, and you can run outside that zone toss off of it like they did against the Patriots. It's something where Mike McDaniel has blended everything together, and now everything looks the exact same, which is a problem for defenses because your head is spinning. Defenses are much more attack react. You are not supposed to think too hard on defense because that's wasting time. You are on the defensive. You cannot think too much. Your objective is to go. And the Dolphins make you think so much. And combine that with the threat of speed, the moment you think too long, Tyreek Hill is 15 yards behind you. And it's so difficult. And like you said, I think the biggest thing to do if you're the Bills, is speed up that process. Either force them to get the ball out quicker or force them to throw it a little later. Try and flood the windows after looking like you're sending pressure. Try and make it a little more difficult. Change the picture for them.
I love that. And you said so many things that got me excited because I have so many of my points tie in with that. I got some film that we're going to look into too. Oh, I'm very excited. I'm going to go with my first point, which ties in. It picks up literally kind of where you left off. It was very wordy. I hate how I worded this, but it is what it is. So how the Bills defense combats the Dolphins' use of motion and then tying that in with getting pressure and getting home versus Tua. And that first piece, you hinted at it already. Miami uses motion to create leverage, to create spacing, and then force defenses to adjust at the last minute and process in real time as the snap happens. We talk about so much, ironically, from what kind of the Fangio tree did, and Fangio being the DC in Miami now. We talk like so much of the conversation for defenses the past several years has been like changing the pre to post snap picture. And you mentioned it now with what you want to try to do to Tua. Miami does that on offense. Like they change the pre to post snap picture with like that fast motion or that burst motion right at the last second before the snap happens. And the defenses all of a sudden have to be like, and like they have to adjust in real time. And that's so hard in general. Like as a defender, you not only need to execute your assignment, but you need to know that your teammate is going to execute the assignment you think they're going to make. And if you think I'm doing A, but I'm actually doing B, that's where blown assignments happen and busted coverages happen. And against the speed of Miami, it's even more of a problem. And so all of those pieces, the leverage, the spacing, the last minute adjustments and processing, those are problems in a vacuum on their own, in and of themselves. Miami can cause all of those problems and those things to happen in one play. And then again, like you said, it's even more dangerous with them because of the speed that they have in their weaponry group. And especially from a processing standpoint, I love what you said. Like you want to be reading and reacting. When you have to think that much as a defender, that means you're playing slower. That means you're hesitating, which is a problem again in and of itself. But even more so when you're playing an offense where everybody runs like a 3.9 40 and is just got rocket boosters attached to them in like every step of the way. Miami forces you to think, and in that thinking, they create hesitation in you. And while you're hesitating, Miami's wide receivers and running backs are running by you. Even their slower players like Durham Smythe at tight end are just running by you because you're sitting there being like, okay, somebody came in orbit motion. Okay, there was a puller, but Tua's eyes are here. Oh, there goes the ball. And then you're beat, and it's a problem. And when you look at that motion piece, so again, that's in and of itself. But then you look at how Miami has executed with that motion. Tua has 101 attempts on the year. 80 of them have come with motion. Out of 34 qualifying quarterbacks, when they have somebody in motion, he's first in EPA at 46.3. 46.3. Second is Brock Purdy at 11.9. And he's got 10 less attempts. So it's not like, well, Tua has thrown like 70 more attempts than him. It's only a 10 attempt difference. And the EPA difference is 46.3 for Tua to 11.9 for Purdy. Tua is also first in attempts with motion at 80. Patrick Mahomes is also tied with him with 80 attempts with motion. Mahomes' EPA is negative 0.93. Again, Tua's is 46.3. With that motion, again, out of those 34 qualifying quarterbacks. So first in EPA, first in total attempts, first in yards per game at 287.7, first in yards per attempt at 10.8, second in rating at 139.8. He's been sacked 0 times. He has the third lowest pressure percentage at only 22%. It's just unreal how much I guess not unreal when you understand like the bones of it and who they have, but McDaniel has just crafted this offense to take advantage of the skill set that his players have, and then pairing that with these concepts and these last minute advantages and pre-snap movements that just confuse defenses, make them have to think and make them have to process. And then tying within that, again, whether it's motion or not, Tua just hasn't really been pressured a ton. It hasn't been sacked a ton. Per PFF, amongst 34 qualifying quarterbacks, again, he's only been pressured on 21% of his dropbacks. That's the lowest amongst all 34 qualifying quarterbacks. Big one here, he has the second lowest pressure to sack percentage at 4.5%. He's 21st in rating at 57.7. Second lowest average time to throw when he's pressured at a whopping 2.77. So even when he's pressured, he's still getting the ball out quick. And then he's fifth. This is a bigger one, though. When he's pressured, he's fifth in average depth of target at 13.7. And then you put that focus shifted to the Bills defense. They're second in the NFL in pressure percentage per Sports Info Solutions at 43.3%. So you've got Tua, who is not getting pressured a ton, not getting sacked. Pressures aren't being converted to sacks. And you've got this Bills defense that has been hunting week after week, generating pressures, being efficient across the front four, working with their simulated pressures, working with creepers, working with their 5 and 6 man pressure, showing pressure, dropping out. They did it to Sam Howell a bunch in the Commanders game. One of my big things coming in was Howell will stay on his first target for too long and wait for things to come open. They confused the picture on him on multiple times and allowed the front four to get home. Can you do that to Tua? Because again, his average time to throw is 2.34 seconds. He's getting the ball out quickly with timing, with rhythm, with anticipation. So that pressure piece is the larger scale overall perspective. Like, can the Bills defense, can they get home? Can they generate pressure? Can they turn those pressures into sacks? Because teams have not been able to do that against Tua in Miami. So one of those things is going to have to budge. And then the smaller niche picture is just how do the Bills adjust to that motion? Because what gave them, you mentioned Taron Johnson getting pulled from the box with motion. That started last year. The Packers game, that Sunday night game, LaFleur, another, Shanahan tree guy, they started using motion to pull defenders from the box, and they turn a 6-man box into a 5-man box. And then they started gouging the Bills with the run. And we saw with the Packers, the Dolphins did it later in the year. Like, the motion caused problems from a run game perspective. Miami uses it to cause problems with the pass and a little in the run, which we're going to get into in a bit with another one of my points. But man, it's just such a huge schematic piece for me.
It's huge. And one of the things I love about how Mike McDaniels used Tyreek Hill on that small burst motion is he noticed what problems defenses gave him when we kind of went, oh, they're starting to be figured out a bit. And that's just like last year, it was just jam them, like force them.
Yeah.
Instead of slowing down Tua with pressure and simulated pressure looks, slow down the receivers too. Get in their face, force them to make a little bit of a move, force them to waste time a little bit at the line of scrimmage. But you can't really do that now because of that burst motion. You're basically creating a free run for Tyreek Hill. You're giving him a free release. And offense is so much with motion. You are basically creating your own angles. Mm-hmm. It's geometry. It's basically just geometry. You're creating an angle for your fastest guys, which happen to be like the 4 fastest people in football ever. So, but what Tyreek Hill does is he can run that little burst motion, instead of having him come all the way across and wasting that energy, just have him run a few yards and then start the play. Let him run directly at a corner who is now like has the fear of God put in him because Tyreek Hill is running at him at 100 miles an hour, and you don't really know what to do. And they can build so much off of that. Where you think that burst motion is going to be used on a wheel route where he's going vertical, he can turn it into a comeback. He'll turn it into a dig, and now you have that speed going every other direction. So I think that's going to be the biggest point is how they adjust to motion, like you said, in the passing game and how they adjust to motion in the run game. It actually ties it to the second point I'm going to get into.
Oh, I love it. And that actually maybe ties into my second point a little as well. So hit us with your second point. What do you got?
So my second point is Tua Tagovailoa versus the Bills' second-level defenders. I think this is going to be another huge matchup in this game. Watching the Commanders game, you can tell the Bills' second level works so well together. I think about the first interception Sam Howell threw, where they tried to use motion to get Terrell Johnson in or out of the box. They moved him in, and Matt Milano just bounced right down to the flat. And Terron Johnson was able to pick up the over route. Cole Turner was running, and he runs with him. That takes away the over in cover 3, which is supposed to be the thing you can hit. And now you have multiple eyes on this hook route that Sam Howell eventually throws, and it ends up getting picked. They pass off routes so well. It's like a good defensive soccer team. You are never going to find a space where there aren't multiple sets of eyes watching you or watching this person try and go into this space. And as soon as you pass that ball, the lane closes. It's so fun to watch.
It's like Atletico Madrid from like years and years ago under Simeone when they were running like granted they like parked the bus, but you tried to get something in the box or in that lower third, and it was like there's no space, you can't breathe. Everybody's got eyes everywhere. You got nothing.
There's nothing there. They are parking the bus on opposing offenses. Like they're going to flood the area, flood the middle of the field, and that's going to be the biggest thing. On Sports Info Solutions, Tua has 42 of his 101 passing attempts target the middle of the field. That's I think it's top 10 in the NFL this year, but his total EPA on those targets is almost 10 points better than second place. He is so good over those areas. And through the first 3 games of the season, the Bills are first in total EPA per pass allowed on targets over the middle of the field. They've been really good in that area. And what they did against Commanders is they would spin a safety down late. And it's great to have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer both healthy because those are 2 extremely smart defenders at safety. You can spin either of them down. They've seen a whole lot of ball. They know a whole lot of route combinations. They can basically see what's coming next. I think there was a route against Commanders where they tried to bring a slot receiver on like a little drag route, and Poyer just sees it.
Oh, on McLaurin.
And on McLaurin, and he just nails him for like a 2-yard gain. That's supposed to be open, and they close it in an instant. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about the Patriots game was the Patriots played the Dolphins kind of well in the second half. That offense, I mean, it was kind of out of hand because the Patriots offense couldn't move the ball. But what they did was they would spin a safety down, or they would drop into that middle hook area where you just flood that area. I think about the Marte Mapu illegal hit where Matt Judon is running with Tyreek Hill and breaks up the pass. That's changing the picture, but it's also moving guys, flooding that middle of the field area. That's something they're going to have to do a lot. Force Tua to take the inefficient throws to the outside areas of the field. Of course, that is going to be, it's going to be difficult because Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle live in those areas. But you have a lot better option there than it is having him dice you over the middle of the field. I think the second level defenders are also going to be important because they have to tackle. You better be on your A game tackling against Miami Dolphins. They're top 5 in broken tackles forced in the passing and run game. I think they're first in broken tackles forced in the run game. That's something that I noticed in the Patriots game and in the Broncos game. Raheem Mostert has really good contact balance. He might not be, I'm not even going to say he's not the fastest guy anymore because he's like one of the 4 fastest people on that team. But they have such good contact balance. You better bring your A game tackling against the Dolphins because not only like they're not just going to turn a 5-yard route into a 10-yard gain, they're going to turn it into 50 because of how fast they are. So those second level defenders, Matt Milano, Terron Johnson, Terrel Bernard is going to have to play really well. They're going to try and put the microscope on Bernard, and I wonder how Sean McDermott kind of insulates him against Mike McDaniel, basically trying to isolate him from everybody else on the field. I think he did it really well against the Commanders. So that's my second point.
I love that. And it ties into my point as well, but I want to comment on yours first because I thought it was so well said. I think what helps with Bernard too is Bernard's biggest strength is how good of a processor he is and how comfortable he is in these pro style coverages and matching coverages, coming from that Dave Aranda system at Baylor. Like he's just so smart and so efficient in diagnosing, processing, recognizing things in real time. And what he's shown now is his ability to like get everybody set pre-snap and dictate and communicate, which has been a huge bonus. But I love that second level point. In watching, so the first two plays of the game against the Broncos, first play, it's a run to Mostert and gets like 6 yards. Second play is just some run action, and the second level gets sucked in. Tua hits, I think, like a 3-step drop, and Durham Smythe just goes right behind the second level, and he's wide open, and boom, there you go. And Tua he hits so quick on those routes. And I always thought Tua was better than he was given credit for, especially amongst, I got a lot of negative flack from Bills fans for a while for it here on the show. Like, no, Tua sucks. And I was like, no, like he's better than you think he is. I still don't think he has the strongest arm. So I want to make him live outside the numbers. Do not give him, the shortest distance between 2 points in the middle of the field and be able to hit those quick throws over the middle and allow him to stay on time. I think this goes to the first points we were kind of talking about of getting him off rhythm, like make him have to push those throws farther, make him have to layer throws outside and, over your flat defender and, or over a cloud corner, make him have to make those harder throws because he will dice you up in the middle. I love the numbers you pulled too about like the middle of the field stuff from the Bills and Dolphins. That was absolutely tremendous. And that's going to be a huge piece. I have something similar for my second one. We'll talk about it with it overall in general. So it's the Bills defense versus the Dolphins run game in general. But it really ties in with your first point, that interior defensive line, and then the second level defenders. The Bills have to win up front versus the run. They have to win with the defensive line. They have to get penetration. They have to get push. Miami's going to throw so much at you in the run game, and I'm going to show a couple clips of it in a minute, that it is going to put those second level defenders in hell. It is going to make them, like you were talking about, it's going to put them in conflict. It's going to make them have to think like they have their coverage responsibilities. But then if the defensive line is getting eaten up, that's a bigger problem. And Miami's run game, you mentioned a couple of the stats already. So Miami's run game this year, these are some big ones. They're first in yards after contact at 291 yards. They're third in yards after contact per rush. They're second in broken tackles. They're second in missed tackles. They're first in broken tackles plus missed tackles forced per rush at 25.8%. They're second in EPA per rush, and they're second in total EPA. This dangerous passing attack with all this speed now has a legitimate pivot and complementary piece in the run game with, again, two speedy backs with Mostert and A-Chain. A-Chain has good contact balance too. He's a speed merchant, so it's understandable. But my favorite thing about him when watching his tape at A&M coming out was he was such a tough runner, and he showed a couple times, the one touchdown run early, I think the one that put Miami up 14-0. He dips under, I think, Singleton, and then carries Damari Mathis and drags another defender like over the line for the touchdown. Like, he's tougher. And so you have all that, the speed, the agility, broken tackles, and all this in the run game for Miami. We know what they do with the pass game as well. But the Bills defense, from a rush perspective, they're giving up 4.7 yards after contact per rush this year. That is the most in the league. The Broncos are second at 3.4. So they basically have a 1.3 yard difference between them and whoever's in second. With the Dolphins' speed and how they create leverage in space, that's very much less than ideal. And if you take it back to the Week 15 game in 2022, the night game in Buffalo that the Bills won 32-29, the Dolphins ran for 188 yards in that game. And the Bills' run defense in that game allowed 5.6 yards after contact per rush. That was the most in the league that week. The Raiders were second at 4.5. So again, over another full yard difference. And then the Bills defense in that game, 23.8% broken tackle plus missed tackle force percentage in that game. Miami also in that game had a 0.36 EPA per rush. That was the highest in the league for that week. And for reference, the Lions in 2022 led the entire NFL in EPA per rush at 0.09. So the Lions were the best rushing team on the year at 0.09. Miami had a 0.36 rushing EPA per attempt in that game, which is unreal. Like, that's If teams could do that regularly, they would run the ball on every snap. It's just nuts what they can do from a statistical standpoint. And then this is, with a couple of pieces that you mentioned, I wanted to bring up some tape here. Okay, good. This one I want to show. So this first play, actually, no, I'm going to lead with the second one first. This second one, and it ties into, what you were talking about, Miami's pass play last year, that whole like seam wheel slide route that like they got to out of almost any personnel, any formation, anything they try to do. Now they're starting to incorporate that piece in the run, and it also works in with that fast motion or that burst motion from Hill. So I got Tyreek Hill circled right now, and you'll see it on the play. And this also ties into Teron Armstead getting out on the perimeter. You get some crack toss action here, like you were talking about earlier. Look at all the space for Mostert, what he does. Armstead's out there making plays. Boom. Okay, so you have a successful run. But my bigger piece with it is, like you talked about earlier, how it ties in with everything else they're doing and what it looks like. So if we let the play run and we stop it right here, this could be your wheel, this could be your seam, and goal could be the slide route or the flat route easily. Like it ties in so well. So if you're the defense, and I feel bad for Damari Mathis there, number 27. He sees Hill moving. He is out. He's like, uh-oh, here it goes. You have to respect that speed. You have to also respect, again, that pass concept, the seam, wheel, flat piece, because of how dangerous it's been. And this run could have easily turned into that. So now they are, like you talked about, instead of having Hill come from here and going all the way across field, now they're lining him up on that same side and using that burst motion or that fast motion. And now they're also tying in some of their run concepts into that dangerous pass concept piece, which is, again, even more of a problem. And then this other play that I have, this run to me was just nuts. So you have Mostert starts out wide, motions into the backfield, and then you've got 2x2 condensed. This is a chain right here. They bring Berrios in orbit motion, who becomes essentially a lead blocker. They have the run action to Mostert, and then they run the end around A chain. And there's just so much space. And there's Denver bodies everywhere. And look at A-Chains just jumping and breaking tackles and carrying guys. And this piece from the end zone angle, like we talked about it, right? Like the hesitation, making you have to think, like, watch the second level defenders as everything's happening here. So they start to shift already because they're like, okay, here comes some motion. And then you get a flash of color because they ran a puller right here. So now it's like, uh-oh, let me stop because maybe this is coming back this way. Plus I see the running back. He stopped moving, he stopped moving, he stopped moving, which is now created leverage because you're getting out on the perimeter, and now you've created angles, geometry, for your offense to get out and seal these guys and make plays, and then everybody's caught inside. You have everybody leading out in front. This is so funny here, just body.
Just leave them in the wake. I think the funniest part about this play is right there. That's Connor Williams. He popped the wheel on this play. Hamstring is done. And it doesn't matter because Devin A-Chain is 30 yards downfield. If you rewind it back, I think there's something really important here with this Dolphins run game. Look at how light the Broncos are playing up front.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how light that is. They're playing, looks like two eyes and two edges.
Yeah.
They're playing naturally light because you're so worried about the pass.
Mm-hmm.
And in the motion, I think this one I'm most worried about with Teron Johnson motioning in and out of the box. They're going to run that puller play. They're going to run that pull. And I want to see if they bump Teron Johnson inside the box, are they going to incorporate Teron Johnson? Are they going to force him to keep hitting these guards over and over? And as much as I love Teron Johnson, that shit hurts.
That'll wear you down.
Believe me, hitting a 300-pound man 40 times a game, that hurts. So I wonder what the Bills will try and do to keep Teron Johnson, not to say he's a liability here, but you want him not thinking. You want him reacting naturally. I wonder what they do to keep him out of conflict in this run game. Because like you said, they throw so much eye candy at you. They throw so much, like the first run play was so well designed because like you said, it incorporates everything that they run. And look, if you go back to it, what they did is the outside corner. That's the boundary corner right there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love for offenses to do is force the corners to tackle.
Yes, they're in theory. I talked about it on last week's show. Like in theory, the corners are the worst tacklers on the team. Make them live in that spot. The Bills have been doing it the way they've been running. They ran more traditional gap scheme with pullers this past week, but against the Raiders, they hammered duo and they washed it down, and they made Bennett and Marcus Peters have to tackle over and over, and it didn't work. Like, so sorry, I got excited. Continue.
Yeah, they get paid to cover. They don't get paid to tackle. And one of the things I noticed that was super cool about it is you can tell the Broncos are so worried about this burst motion because they're just locking Damari Mathis on Tyreek Hill. They don't want to leave that little hook area open with the communication of passing the route off, because now with the run play, you have so much space with how wide Tyreek Hill gets. And now you have a corner out there on a fullback or a tackle. And like I said, they get paid to cover. They do not get paid to take on blocks. And now you're off to the races. So that's just how you manage the space that the Dolphins create in the run game is going to be such a critical thing for this game. How you manage to close that space, make them work in tight, confined areas. That goes for the run and pass game. Flood the area, make them squeeze them in. I think the biggest thing for the Bills is try and force everything back inside. Force it to your numbers. If you let them get to the outside, they're going to win that foot race. They've shown multiple times they have multiple dudes who are going to win that foot race.
Yeah, that's so well said. Like, and what really scared me, like, as if I'm trying to figure out how to stop Miami, or at least, like, again, like, slow them down, that whole piece, like, and it was known last year, the spacing and the leverage and the conflict, all of it was known in the pass game. Now they've managed to do it in the run schematically. Like, they're creating space. Like, we just showed 2 runs there. Look how much space A-Chain had on that end around. Look how much space Mostert had on that first one I showed. And that was consistent, especially on the edges. And now that Teron Armstead is, hopefully healthy for Miami, if you're a Miami fan, boo, if you're a Bills fan, he's now, like you said, like, he's pulling that Trent Williams action where he's just out in space, crushing linebackers and safeties. And both of those clips, he's downfield, just making plays. And them working on the perimeter with these crack toss runs is terrifying for a defense, because it's creating runways for 2 of, if not the 2 fastest running backs in the NFL with Mostert and A-Chain. And again, that was something that you had to live with from a passing perspective. Like, oh, like, look at the way he schemed up Hill and Waddle. Man, it's so great. And working with Tua. Now they're doing it with the run game. And you can get caught out now in the run, just like you can get caught out in the pass. And when you get caught out against Miami, it's not like, well, 7 yards turned into 15. It's no, 7 yards turned into 75 and you're done. And it's a touchdown. And it's problematic. And it is very problematic. All right. Your last point, last schematic piece. What do you got?
My last point is kind of a mix of schematics and the overall message I think the Bills wanted to send with their offseason moves. My last point, Ken Dorsey versus Vic Fangio.
Oh,
This is a proof of concept game for the Buffalo Bills offense. You go out and get Dalton Kincaid in the first round because you want to live in 12 personnel. You want to force teams to get into their base defense and force you to have to make the choice. Either you get bigger up front and we hammer you in the run game, or you play light up front and if you get bigger up front, up front, we isolate Kincaid on the underneath defenders. If you get lighter up front, we will hammer you in the run game. The Dolphins defense has been, I think they've been highly rated early. I think their EPA per play among passing attempts, I think they're 7th in the NFL per SIS, but I haven't been super impressed with either facet of the game defensively for them. I mean, of course, you look back to week 1, the Chargers ran for what felt like 270 yards. I think they had one of the 10 most efficient running games in the last decade. And then you go look at the Patriots game. Yeah, they were better in the run game, but Mac Jones played arguably his best game since his rookie year against that defense. So I think there's an avenue here for the Bills to be really, really effective on the offensive side of the ball. I think, they really miss Jalen Ramsey. I think adjusting to this Vic Fangio defense is a big thing that was kind of underrated throughout this offseason. They're going from a Flores, like Bill Belichick, like up front, that's going to be huge. They're going from that style of defense to gap and a half, gap control instead of gap penetration.
So different.
It's such a different world, such a different world. And now you're playing lighter up front. And now you're trying to bring, again, kind of like the Bills, they're bringing a nickel into that run fit, into that conflict. I think there's an avenue here for what the Bills wanted to do in the offseason, what they're trying to be. There's an avenue for this to be a proof of concept game for Ken Dorsey to try and maximize the efficiency of Josh Allen, try and maximize Dalton Kincaid against. I don't think the linebackers for the Dolphins are that good in coverage. I think they've been kind of hit or miss. And like I said, the Chargers had one of the most efficient rushing games ever against the Dolphins in week 1. So this is going to be a huge game for Ken Dorsey and to kind of silence a little bit of the issues, kind of the complaints that people have about him. I think he's been fine as a coordinator, but this is the game that you really like. This is the proof of concept for this offense against this style of defense. This is the style of defense you tried to build yourself to beat now.
I love it. And so I'm just going to build on it. It's very similar to my third point. So my third point is Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey versus Josh Allen / Vic Fangio. So I'll tie it in with your first pieces. So I want to start with the run. I mentioned earlier how good Miami's rush attack is, and I mentioned how they're second in EPA per rush and second in total EPA. The reason they're second is because the Bills are first in EPA per attempt on the ground and first in total EPA on the ground. This run game with the revamp on the offensive line, Connor McGovern, O'Cyrus Torrence, especially Torrence, his size and his skill set, it added a downhill element to this running game. And that's what you are seeing. You are seeing, again, they are spamming duo because it works. And Cook is so good at reading that play side linebacker and understanding, he, flowed or scraped a little too much. I'm banging it inside. He stayed in. We washed it down. I'm one-on-one with a corner, and I either have the speed advantage or the break tackle attempt advantage. When Cook's contact balance has been much better this year than it was last year and much better than it was in Georgia, which has been a nice piece. And so that run game has been legitimate. What they did against Washington, they started using, they started pulling a little bit more, and O'Cyrus Torrence was working on the pull. Like they ran some GH counter, which was nice. You already know McGovern with his athleticism can pull. Mitch Morse can get out in space. Spencer Brown, for as much maligned as he's been in pass protection, is phenomenal as a run blocker and great on the move. Deion Dawkins is good on the move as well, so they can lean into that world if they need to. That run game has been so important, and I think it's so important in this game for, again, all that piece, Allen and Dorsey versus Fangio, but also against Josh Allen himself. Allen, and I spoke a lot about this after the Bills lost to the Jets because I hammered it all towards the end of last year. And I thought, man, you said so many good points. I could talk like 50 minutes on this. So much of what happened down the stretch of the Bills last year, so much of it was getting laid at the feet of Ken Dorsey. And I was like, oh, man, he's calling all these vertical routes and all these vertical concepts. People were acting like every pass play was just 4 verts, and it wasn't. It was Allen trying to take those because he wanted that. He wanted to go for the throat. Some of it was also his elbow and the angles that he had to throw at. But I had this conversation down the stretch last year and again after that week 1 game. Josh Allen wants to maximize everything on every single play. It does not matter the game, the score, the situation, the point of the year. It does not matter. He wants to maximize everything on every single play. The same thing that exists in him that makes him force an unnecessary throw is the same thing that makes him leap over a linebacker or run through somebody. It is the yin and the yang of Josh Allen. Like, that is who he is. And when things go sideways, he wants to maximize things even more. There is no, all right, let me kind of reset and get after it. No, he's like, I screwed up. I got to make up for it right away. If he makes a mistake, he wants to get it all back, and he wants to get it all back as quickly as possible, which can lead him down a path where he stacks mistakes on top of one another, and it starts to snowball. And what we've seen the past couple of weeks, again, I like the game plan that Dorsey had in week 1. I was critical of Dorsey last year in October and into November, but I thought he got better as the year went on. I liked what he did starting in this season in week 1. Again, a lot of that loss offensively was on Josh Allen, but what he did against the Raiders and against Washington he started working more formations, alignments, and concepts that made things easier for Allen to take what's given to him. A lot of it from just a basic level, starting to work in a variety of sail concepts from a variety of personnel groupings and formations. And because defenses are trying to keep everything in front of them and make Josh Allen live efficiently, the underneath, the flat route was open every time, and Allen's dumping it down to Cook, and he's got 7-8 yards of space, and he's turning it into a 20-yard gain because what he can do after the catch. So Dorsey started kind of baking those pieces in. Who knows? Maybe he also gave him a stern talking to, during the week and be like, you better hit this friggin' route because you're killing us. But he started working in, again, formations, alignments, and concepts that made things easier for Allen to take what's given to him. And that, plus the success of the Bills' run game, big time difference these past couple of weeks. Also, a big time difference is not having to play the Jets defense, who is one of the best defenses in the NFL. Different point. Allen has to take what's given to him. He's still the trigger man in this offense. So he can take what's given to him like he did versus the Raiders and Commanders, or he can force the issue like he did versus the Jets. And as a defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, almost the godfather of this whole disguising coverage, changing the pre to post snap picture, single high versus two high shells, and middle of the field open versus close, match coverage, all these pieces. Also a big thing that I wanted to mention just in passing. I think everybody assumes Vic Fangio, two high shell, all he runs is two high coverages. Vic Fangio runs a lot more single high than you think he does, especially cover three, and they'll match it and they'll do a good job with it. Taking what's given to you against a Vic Fangio defense becomes even more important. And so in a high stakes game earlier in the year versus a defense with talent that's still adjusting with a good defensive coordinator versus a player in Christian Wilkins who Josh Allen hates with a passion, there is opportunity in this game from a variety of standpoints for the emotion of everything to bring out the inefficiency in Josh Allen. So does Josh Allen police himself? Can Dorsey police Josh Allen? Like, who reigns in who? Is it schematic? Is it emotional? What does Vic Fangio do to try and bring out that Hyde to Josh Allen's Dr. Jekyll type of thing? Does Dorsey continue to curate these well-developed game plans and concepts? There's so many variables that go into it, which makes it such a complicated piece, but I think it ties so well into your piece because it's Dorsey versus Fangio, but also like Josh Allen versus Josh Allen. It's also Fangio versus Josh Allen. Like, there's so many layers and pieces of it and how it all coalesces. Like, because Miami's game plan last year, again, different system and scheme. In that week 3 game, I know the heat was a huge element, but that defense, they taxed the hell out of Josh Allen physically and mentally. They made him have to make every single play. They were just showing pressure and bringing it, and then they would show like a 7-man pressure, and Javon Holland is like on the edge, and on the snap, he's dropping as the post safety in a cover 3 look. Like, last year's week 3 game was nuts. And so it's a different flavor with Fangio, but it can still stress you, put you in a different mindset. And when Allen gets stressed and he makes mistakes, he has, unfortunately, the capability to stack them and build them one on top of the other. So I think that's a great point, and I got excited with how much it tied into mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think I put it on Twitter after Josh Allen threw the fourth interception, the fourth turnover against the Jets. Josh Allen plays like Cheese from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Like, he's gonna have the TV. Like, he's gonna have that mode to him the entire game. He's gonna go cheese mode sometimes, and that's the best thing about Josh Allen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of like in Naruto, when Naruto leads off every fight with the Rasengan. You don't have to do this, but when it hits, it looks great. When it doesn't, you're destroying an entire city. Like, you have to be able to maximize the efficiency of Josh Allen while still allowing Josh Allen to do the Josh Allen whack. And I think another way that they can do this is get Stephon Diggs working underneath. That's something they did a lot of in that week 3 game. It wasn't only working underneath, but on the outside, it wasn't every play running 30 yards downfield. It was stop routes. It was hitches. Try and get him working back into a rhythm. If they're going to force you to take what's being given, take the 6-yard hitch. Take the stop route to Stephon Diggs, because eventually they're going to start trying to come up. You keep battering them with that, and you start being efficient with that, then you can start to hit the Rasengan. You got to hit them with a few punches first. It's like boxing. You're not going to lead off with the knockout punch. You got to throw the jab. Throw the jab a little bit, and then once they start leaning for the jab, then you hit them with the haymaker. So I think that's where Josh Allen has to be in this game. I wonder how much Dalton Kincaid working underneath we're going to see. One thing that I loved watching during the preseason was how much they used him as kind of the broken off Y. He's in the slot instead of attached to the line of scrimmage, and then he's just running option routes. It's very much, I don't want to call it Kelsey, but it's very Travis Kelsey-ish.
We say it's like the Cole Beasley piece around here, but the Kelsey piece is fair. Yeah, he's more that F guy, and they'll hip him off, or they'll move him and use him as like just a bigger Cole Beasley, or Travis Kelsey. It sets expectations, but it's fair.
Yeah, it's that way that they're using it. You can tell the Bills have played the Chiefs a lot during the Josh Allen era because they're like, hey, let's go get a guy that moves like that to try and help Josh Allen out. So I think getting Kincaid involved underneath against these linebackers, against the nickel corners, finding the ways to break this defense underneath, combining that with the run game, then that'll allow you to hit the deep shots. You cannot just come in and immediately think haymaker. That's going to cause turnovers. That's going to force. That's exactly how Vic Fangio wants you to play. He wants you to come in thinking with the pressure of, oh, they're going to try and take everything away underneath. I got to try and go get it now because they're just going to try and constrict you closer and closer as the game gets tighter and tighter. They did that to Justin Herbert at the end of the game. They kept constricting the passing game. They kept constricting until, boom, simulated pressure, and Kader Kohou is running free at your quarterback. So I think Josh Allen has to be able to temper the cheese brain Josh Allen with the uber efficient buzzsaw Josh Allen that we have seen he can be.
Yeah, it's so hard to like live in the light and the dark. Like he's this unicorn or this alien, whatever you want to, label him as so many people do. And he makes these plays that are just leave you in awe. And then he makes other plays that leave you in awe because they're awful. Like it's just both. And you have to figure out, I love it, like how to balance it and how to temper it. And, it's one last piece on it. Like the Fangio defense, the whole idea of it philosophically, granted there's many philosophical pieces, but the idea, like it's trying to limit explosives, like even the whole gap and a half piece and like how that tied in with Staley, who's a Fangio tree guy, like going to that tight front and what he did there. The whole idea is just limiting explosives and trying to slow things out or string things out so your help can come, so you can rally, you can tackle, you can force things to a choke point, you can kill and go from there. Fangio like wants to keep everything in front of him and limit like quarterbacks in general, even more so like quarterbacks that system was developed to stop, like Allen and Mahomes and all these guys that could push the ball vertically. And Josh McDaniels had a really great point. I said on the show last week at halftime of Bills Raiders game, the reporter for that game, she spoke to McDaniels and she came out and McDaniels said, I'm paraphrasing, but they wanted to see if Josh Allen would be efficient. They wanted to make him live efficiently, and he was. So now we got to change our game plan. You're just going to continue to see that from coordinators and defenses in general, let alone a coordinator like Fangio, who kind of founded this system of keep everything in front of you, force it to certain points, constrict. And that's an excellent point of what happened in that Chargers game, because you'll see the total stats and think like, this Dolphins defense sucks. But as that game went on, things changed a little bit. And granted, it was not a good overall performance, but when they needed to the most, they constricted everything, the passing windows, the route tree, the route distribution. And it can start that way in a hurry if you are not efficient, if you don't take what's given you. And, a sail concept is a great idea, or a great microcosm of what you're saying. If you take that flat route enough times, eventually they're going to honor it, and then the sail route becomes available. And that's when you gouge them for 15 or 20 or 25, or if you hit the vertical if you want. But yeah, you can't just, old Al Davis Raiders style and just gun it 100 miles an hour and we're chucking vertical balls like every single play. Like it's not sustainable in this way. And then on top of that, playing against the Dolphins, the worst thing you can do offensively is have a 1 minute and 5 second drive or go 3 and out. And now you're handing the ball back to Tua, because this Dolphins offense is in a similar mode of what the Chiefs offense was several years ago, where it was, you don't want to give that ball back to Patrick Mahomes. That's why the Ravens were such a great foil for the Chiefs. One, because they had this unicorn running game, but two, it would ground up that clock and Mahomes is just sitting there on the sidelines twiddling his thumbs. So if Allen is inefficient, not only are you not succeeding and not scoring and not moving the ball, you're turning it over, you're giving it back to Tua in that defense or that offense. And then you're also tiring out your own defense, who has to run around the field at 100 miles an hour trying to cover everybody. Oh, everything stacks and ties in. and weaves into everything. JP, I kept you longer than I said, so I sincerely apologize.
No, it's good. It's good. I was just thinking about another point that I was thinking
Do
about
it.
with
Yeah.
Josh Allen. Like, I think it's I kind of joked about it last year. You can tell when the Bills thought this was a big game or an important game based on how many times they designed quarterback runs for Josh Allen.
Nice.
I wonder how much we're going to see designed quarterback run Josh Allen on Sunday. I think the offense has kind of matured to the point where they don't have to lean on Josh Allen running the ball 10 to 15 times a game. But I wonder if they kind of mix it in to keep the defense honest and kind of remind them, like, yeah, this guy is an ostrich running with the football. You don't want to try and tackle him. But I wonder how much they temper that with, Josh Allen can sometimes go cheese brain, where if you let him kind of hold on to the ball a lot, that's basically what happened last year in week 3. Josh Allen tried to do far too much. He had to do far too much in week 3, and you could tell he was forcing the issue. I wonder how they temper giving him the ball in the QB run game to kind of keep the Dolphins defense honest, while also not letting him think he has to do everything to keep this team in the game.
I love that point. That Allen run game piece has always been kind of like the break glass in case of emergency type aspect. And so, yeah, like when they're going into it, it's either a big game or it's a playoff time. Like, ironically, like he usually does it a lot against the Chiefs. Did it a ton in that second half of the Bucs game a couple years ago when they needed to make a comeback, and it was like, let's lean into this piece. But again, with that comes the risk part of the risk reward, because it's like, okay, like, let's start doing this. Is he going to try to hop over somebody when he shouldn't? Is he going to try and run through somebody when he shouldn't? Like, even just the little one, the Jets one that really killed me was he had the first down, and all he had to do, like, he's got it already. Like, it's not even close. And he's surrounded by like 3 Jets defenders. And instead of just like stepping out of bounds, he tries to drop the shoulder and he gets wrecked. And it's just like that. No, that's bad. Like, you don't need that. If it's 3rd and 11 and you're at the 9 or the 10-yard spot, cool. You got to go through somebody to get that first down. But if you've already got it, chill a little. But he doesn't, like, he goes cheese brain, like you said. And it's just, but that's also what makes him great. Like, it's the reason he can do so many things. But how does he temper it and how does he match it? Because again, like, this is the game where if you're off on the other side of the ball, the Dolphins are stacking up points, you're making mistakes. That also contributes to the yin and yang of Josh Allen, because if Tua and Miami are succeeding on offense and they're putting up points and he makes a couple mistakes and the Bills go down, I don't know, like 14-0 or 17-0 or something like that, then he presses even more. He's looking at the score. He's thinking of his own mistakes and what's happening. And he's like, all right, I got to get it all back. I got to get it all back now. And then you get into this cycle where you're chasing your tail and stacking negativity on top of negativity. And oh man, this game has so many fun pieces in it.
So much fun layers.
Bro, there's on both sides of the ball. Like, we honestly, like, we focused a lot on the Dolphins offense for what they're doing, and rightfully so, because they're so schematically strong. And then that matchup versus the Bills defense, who was looking schematically strong this year as well. But we really could have just shifted the focus to the other side of the ball too. Like, there's so much from a coordinator standpoint, an individual player standpoint. And then, the X's and O's and schematics of all that, even just from a coach standpoint too. We talked about Dorsey versus Fangio, flipping on the other side too, like McDaniel versus Sean McDermott. Like, Sean McDermott, who's been legitimately one of the most successful defensive coordinators for the last, I don't know, like 15, 16 years, when he's actually been at DC from his time in Philly and then time in Carolina. Like, everything he's learned and what he's done, him going up against one of the best play callers and designers in McDaniel, and that being their real first matchup against one another, because, with McDermott running the defense, like, so many storylines and so many layers and so many pieces. And man, like, you crushed it on this episode, as I hoped you would. I again apologize for keeping you longer than I said. I lied.
No, this is great. This is awesome. I get chills talking about football, just talking football for a long time. This was awesome. I enjoyed it so much.
That's great. I'm glad you had a good time. You crushed it, as I hoped you would, and as I knew you would. Like, again, I've been following your content for a while, and you're absolutely tremendous, and you delivered as I knew you would, and I knew you were capable of. Just in case people don't know who you are, what you do, the floor is yours. For those watching and playing at home, we're going to continue to trudge on. We're going to look at some tape from last week, do some stock up, stock down. But JP, right now, the floor is yours. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, where they can find you, because you are tremendous and everybody should be following you and checking out your work.
Yep, I am a NFL, college football, NFL draft, basically wherever there's football being played, you can probably find me tweeting about it or talking about it at SB Nation. Follow me on Twitter at Acosta32_JP. My biggest thing is I have the column Establish the Fun every Friday, where I take things that I see around football at any level, and if they're fun, I write about it, because football at the end of the day is very fun, and I like to try and have fun with it, and that's what I enjoy. Football is fun, and I like to establish that. So keep following along. There's the Twitter right there. Follow my work at SB Nation. See where we're going.
Yeah, you absolutely, again, you do tremendous work. I love Establish the Fun. I also like all of like the random articles in the off season of like which anime character like are each of these quarterbacks and all these different pieces. Like you just do so much good work combining all those things. So again, everybody give JP a follow. He's great. Again, anything college football based, NFL based, like he's somebody who you can learn from and understand more about the game from a holistic, like league-wide perspective, X's and O's scheme and all that stuff. JP, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for riding with me. I'll see you over on Twitter and on the interwebs. Have a good rest of your night. And again, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Later, bro.
See ya.
Absolutely tremendous guest. JP was fantastic. I appreciate you folks being so kind in your praise of him in the chat. Again, we're going to continue to go through here. We're going to talk about some Bills stuff, having a stock up, stock down conversation going out of week 3. And again, give JP a follow sincerely. He's not just, he doesn't even just focus on one team. He covers league wide for the entire NFL. He's tweeting stuff on college on Saturdays, breaking down college ball. He's a great follow during draft time. Like, I think that's where I first started following him. We really started to click during draft time, like prospect breakdowns and evaluations. So again, he's one of the good ones. Give him a follow over there on the old Twitter. And thank you for being so kind to him in the chat. We're going to trudge on here as we go forward. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, start to funnel them into the chat. I know I've been keeping track of several as I could, but I don't like to get too off track when I have the guest on. But anything, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, anything and everything, bring it into the chat now. Try to bring up as many things as I can as we talk about stock up and stock down after week 3. While you folks are potentially doing that, I'm going to plug the sponsor, One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup and jar pepperoni, a tremendous cheese to sauce ratio. They make their own homemade blue cheese. One of the favorite things, or my favorite things about them, as I mention all the time, and I'm not just saying it, like how kind they are as people, all the different initiatives and drives that they do for the community, partnering with Roswell, Toys for Tots, the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation. They just give back in a lot of ways and in a multitude of ways. I also speak individually. I had some stuff that I was dealing with over the summer, and they were just not from like a business relationship standpoint, just from a person-to-person standpoint, tremendously kind and gracious and helpful to me and my family. So they're good people making great food. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any of the podcasting apps or platforms you're listening to or watching this show on. If you haven't already and you're still here watching live or watching later, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. Likes go a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So if you haven't already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. It helps promote the channel and the episode, puts it to the front page of YouTube, affects all the algorithms, so on and so forth. So if you haven't already, please and thank you, drop a like on this video. It is greatly appreciated. Now, let's talk about some stock up. We're going to talk stock up from a film standpoint first. This Bills game against the Commanders, there's a lot to choose from a stock up perspective. They really had a strong performance offensively and defensively, especially defensively. Obviously, only giving up 3 points. Really was a shutout. They gave up 3 points in the end when the backups were in there. Ron Rivera kicked that field goal, which, to each their own. Didn't want to get shut out, put 3 points up on the board. Go ahead, do you. That is fine. But I wanted to lean into some pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Myself and Eric Turner are going to be doing the Cover One Film Room tomorrow, Wednesday, September 27th, live at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to have a full comprehensive breakdown of anything and everything you need to know from Bills Commanders. But I wanted to dive into some pieces now. And so I'm going to share my screen so we can take a peek at some of these pieces from Bills and Commanders. So the first piece I wanted to bring up, Terrel Bernard, somebody who, that the linebacker position was I think one of heavy conversation going into this year, especially with what things look like in the preseason. Bernard got hurt, and like, okay, Dodson was going to get a bigger opportunity. Dodson did not come through, kind of ironically played himself out of a starting opportunity, is how it looked from the outside. The Bills draft Dorian Williams. They spend another, day 2 pick on a linebacker like they did the previous year with Terrel Bernard. Then they sign Christian Kirksey. AJ Klein is still in the mix. Like they have Babylon Specters. You have all these things, and it's just kind of like, okay, who are they going to lean into? What do they lean into? My big thing was, how does it tie into the coverages they play? Because what they asked of Tremaine Edmonds is hard to ask of other linebackers. But we've seen several strong flashes from Terrel Bernard early in the year. He had obviously had a tremendous game against Washington. We're going to look at this first play here in this first piece. 2nd and 18. This is a run defense snap for Terrel Bernard. And one of my favorite things for him, actually, I'll go back. I'm going to let it play in real time as I talk over it here. But here is Terrel Bernard right here next to Matt Milano. One of my favorite things from Terrel Bernard was, coming out of college, was how he comes forward, especially as a blitzer. He's not, necessarily a blitzer here, but the way he comes forward like a heat-seeking missile. And he can get to the quarterback, he can shoot gaps and get in the backfield, or if he gets encountered by a blocker, he can detonate on that blocker. He does it here against Cole Turner, the tight end for Washington. And again, this is something that tracked on tape for him going back to his time at Baylor. And it's a tight end in this instance, but it could be a pulling guard. It could be a tackle. It could be a center. It could be a bigger tight end, a 6 offensive lineman, a fullback, whoever. When he comes forward and he is fitting the run, he comes forward with bad intentions, literally a heat-seeking missile. And it's a lot to, say that, because he's only around like 220, 223 pounds. He is not a big guy. He's more like a bigger-bodied safety than he is a traditional NFL linebacker. But when he comes forward, it is a problem because of the physicality he comes forward with. And this is a nice piece here. So again, got him circled here, right here in the middle of the field. And it's nothing crazy. Just, first of all, the pre-snap communication pieces. You're seeing a little glimpse of it here on this one, but he's calling out, he's giving direction. Watch the play. So we get the insert here from the tight end, comes forward, he sees the flash, watch him just drop the shoulder, bang, finishes the tight end, Mortal Kombat style, finishes him, takes him down to the ground, and then he didn't really get to see the mesh point on this, so he doesn't know who has the ball. So he goes and he looks to Gibson, but Gibson doesn't have the ball. So he's like, okay, Howell still has it. So then he gets his eyes back onto Sam Howell. We keep going in slow-mo. He finds his way through the trash. Epinesa makes a play, spins Howell around. Bernard finishes. Just a physical, heady play. It's good processing. It's good physicality. It's nice to see. And again, this is the type of action you need to see when you are playing. We're talking about from a structure standpoint here. What the Bills have here, this is a light box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 down linemen, and then you got Bernard and you got Milano. So you have a 6-man box. That is a light box. And this is a 6-man box against 5 offensive linemen, and then the tight end. So it's 6 on 6, which is an even numbers perspective. That's advantage offense because you always have one more gap than you do blockers. So if there's 6 blockers like there are here in the box, 5 offensive linemen plus the tight end, that means there's 7 gaps. Again, the Bills only have 6 in the box. So they have 6 defenders for 7 potential gaps. That means somebody has to steal a gap. Somebody has to squeeze a gap down. One of the safeties from depth have to come and fill. There's got to be some adjustment that you have to make. JP had a great point earlier, from a pass game perspective, how it's about geometry and spacing and angles and all this. The run game perspective is about that as well, but it's more, I don't know what section of math is pure numbers based algebra, but if you think of, the pass game is like spacing and geometry, the run game is just basic mathematics. It's just basic numbers. It's just that piece there. And this is a really good job. Again, there's nothing really to go too much into. Just it's a great play by Terrel Bernard. He comes in, he fits, he blows up the tight end, checks the running back, sees he doesn't have the ball, and then makes the play on Sam Howell. Again, break it down in slow-mo. Here he comes. He keys. Bang. Blows up the tight end. Immediately gets his eyes onto Antonio Gibson because he thinks, okay, does he have the ball? Cool. Let me look. Eyes on Gibson? No, he doesn't have the ball. Cool. Eyes back on Howell. He's got the ball. Find ball, get ball, go hunt. Good play. Good play from Terrel Bernard. Again, physical play. This is something that is really tremendously helpful in this defense. Another play we're going to go to from Mr. Terrel Bernard. This play was called back for holding. So it technically doesn't count. You see the hold right here from Jordan Phillips. That's what keeps Terrel Bernard free. But the bigger thing that I wanted to highlight with this play, here's Terrel Bernard. Watch all the pre-snap communication. So much of the conversation for linebacker this offseason has been, could whoever is the starting middle linebacker, can they wear that green dot like Tremaine Edmonds did? Can they call the defense? Can they communicate? Can they get everybody aligned? Can they make the adjustments pre-snap? Can they give direction? How does their processing ability pre and post snap really function? Because it's such an important piece of the job. That was actually the biggest thing that made me think Terrel Bernard should be the starting linebacker coming into this year, and which made me think he would also win the job. I mentioned it earlier with JP. He's a tremendous processor. He's very heady. It was talked about last year during camp by Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott about how he's a chalkboard to grass or whiteboard to grass kind of guy, which means you show him something on the whiteboard, he learns it, he goes out to the practice field, and he applies it. He's very smart. He's a great processor. He's very strong from the neck up. And again, here he is, Terrel Bernard. Just watch all the communication on this play. Again, here he is. We're going to get some motion. We're going to get some action from Washington. Just watch all the communication. He's calling it out. He's calling out the run. He's calling it out. He's directing. He's dictating. He's literally calling what's going to happen on this play. He's calling it out. He recognizes it, and then the play happens. Bang. Find ball, get ball. Again, play doesn't count. You see the flag there that gets thrown at the end. Jordan Phillips gets called for holding. It's part of the reason what keeps Bernard clean on this play. But again, from this angle, let's go back. Here's Mr. Terrel Bernard. Just watch all the calling out. Given direction. Now he's talking to Milano. He's literally calling out the play. He's telling him where it's going to go, what's going to happen, what needs to be done. And again, they have another light box. Hyde is potentially threatening up here, so you have a potential 7th defender coming in the box. But right now, this is basically a 6-man box, maybe 6.5, depending on how you want to look at it or quantify it. But Bernard's calling it out. He's giving direction. He's giving communication. And then also what's nice on this piece, I know, again, Jordan Phillips here, he holds the guard and the tackle, which is what keeps Bernard clean. But watch how Bernard dips as he fits here on the run. Watch how that little bend, just that slight, changes his surface area so he doesn't get the hand on him on his shoulder pad and it doesn't change his direction. He just dips a little bit, changes his surface area, I should say, fits, makes a play. Again, this didn't count. It was called back as the hold. But everything pre-snap still counts. This is the leadership you want to see. This is the play recognition. This is the tape study. This is understanding the game. This is a huge piece, right? So much of playing fast in the NFL isn't necessarily about being the fastest player. It's how you can process, right? We talked about it earlier with JP, right? What Miami's offense does one of the many things they do that's really tremendous is they make defenses have to think. They make defenses have to process pre-snap and then post-snap. And when you're thinking that much, when you are trying to process that much, you're not playing fast because you have to think. Think about it, right? If you're just doing your job, if you have to think about what you're doing, you're moving slower than if it's just kind of muscle memory. And if it's just reading and reacting and you're making things happen, it's a different kind of piece, right? And Bernard is able to play so fast because he's a good processor. He's got good play recognition. He's a smart dude when it comes to the schematics of the game. And he had a very, 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 very strong game against Washington. Eric did a really great breakdown, fully in depth for Mr. Terrel Bernard. So I didn't want to dive into too much of it because it was already existing on the channel, but I wanted to highlight those two plays in two pieces because, again, I wanted to speak on him a little bit because he had a very tremendous day and a very tremendous game. Another piece that I want to go into here is creeper pressure for the Buffalo Bills. So talked about it earlier with JP, Sean McDermott leaning into different pressure looks and pressure packages. Again, the Bills are not a heavy blitz team. They are a 4-man rush team, but what you can do just because you're a 4-man rush team doesn't necessarily mean you only have to rush these 4 players. That doesn't necessarily mean that. You can bring a simulated pressure or a creeper pressure. Here, the Bills bring a creeper pressure. And a creeper, for those who don't know, a creeper pressure is a 4-man rush where one of the 4 rushers is a non-traditional rusher, and then you are dropping a traditional rusher into coverage. So easiest way to think about it is a creeper pressure would be you are bringing one of these linebackers or a defensive back, and you are dropping one of your defensive linemen into coverage. It's the same thing as a simulated pressure, except a creeper pressure does not show pressure before the snap. So if you watch Matt Milano on this play, he's kind of hanging out. And as the snap happens, he gets closer and he blitzes. That's what makes it a creeper pressure in conjunction with Leonard Floyd dropping out into coverage. It would be a simulated pressure if Matt Milano was lined up right here in the A gap or head up on the center. And then on the snap, Floyd dropped out. That would make it a simulated pressure. But because Milano's not showing pressure pre-snap, it's a creeper pressure. What's nice about this is it falls into like kind of the blitz family because of the non-traditional rusher, but you're still only rushing 4. So you get to drop 7 into coverage. You still have the coverage numbers advantage. Now, granted, one of those coverage players is a defensive lineman where coverage probably is not their strong suit. So that's a bit of a hit from a coverage perspective. But when you bring a creeper or a simulated pressure, you can dictate protection depending on what you do. You can create one-on-one or advantageous matchups. You can force the offense to keep a running back or a tight end into block, even though they don't need to. We talked about it in last week's episode of Disguise Coverage when we did stock up, stock down, and the pressure packages that McDermott was sending and the looks that he was changing post-snap. We showed how he made the Raiders on multiple snaps keep in their running back and their tight end for a 7-man protection because they thought the Bills showed heavy pressure, but then the Bills dropped out of it and only rushed a traditional 4 after the snap. So the Raiders kept in 7 to only block 4 for the Bills, and the Bills had the big time coverage numbers advantage. That's a nice piece for the defense. So there's many advantageous reasons why you would, run a creeper or run a simulated. In this instance, we see again, Matt Milano starting to creep a little bit. Milano takes off. And what's nice about this is, again, right? So the offensive line, they're honoring these 4, thinking those are going to be their 4. So watch the right side of the offensive line here, okay? So they're scanning, they're sliding. Basically, Ed Oliver is occupying these 2. So that's kind of a waste. And then what's happening on the back end, because the back is releasing and where the center is aligned, Rousseau goes inside. It creates a free runner here because now this left tackle has to pick between Milano or Epinesa. He picks Milano because he's going to pick the closest guy to the quarterback. So Epinesa comes free, and that leads to Sam Howell rushing this throw. He throws it inside, and it gets intercepted. So again, a good schematic piece with this creeper pressure. You get a free rusher right off the edge. It heats up the quarterback. Micah Hyde makes a play on the ball. What's also nice about Hyde, watch how Hyde immediately makes a beeline for this running back. Gibson runs this route and kind of bends it to the point where Hyde knows he's going right to the flat. He doesn't run it to the point where kind of more straight to the point where Hyde might think, okay, is he going to go inside? Is he going to go outside? Let me stop and shuffle my feet and break down and figure out where he's going to go. The angle that Gibson takes out of the backfield, because watch Hyde. Hyde IDs him immediately, spins down. This is also 3rd and short. This is 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. Hyde spins down. Watch how he changes his angle. Once Gibson looks back for Howell, now granted, this could be a huge sell job, and Gibson's going to look back and fake, and then all of a sudden he's going to pick up speed and run the wheel, and then Hyde is going to be assed out. But that's not what we get on this play. Hyde, now see, look at how he changes his angle. He was initially coming straighter. Watch him right here. He starts to flatten. And now he's got his eyes on the QB because he knows the situation. He knows the call, and he's thinking this ball is going to come out. Flattens a little bit, and then jumps inside and takes advantage. Baits him, great play. So great play by Micah Hyde, great recognition. But again, all of it is created because of that creeper pressure that the Bills had here. Let me go to the end zone angle on it. Where are we here? All right, we'll go from this one. So again, Mr. Matt Milano blitzes. And see the center, he initially peeks right, sees who he's got to help. There's nothing. They basically wasted 2.5 guys on this play. And then Rousseau knifes inside. So now Rousseau occupies. And see how he gets his hand? Rousseau gets his hand on the guard and then gets his other hand on the center. He's just pure, traffic controller. He just wants to occupy that center and that guard. So the Bills can create a 2-on-1 on this side, which is exactly what happens. And it's exactly how it plays out. The left tackle knows, okay, the shortest path to the quarterback is from the inside. I have to keep going down. So I have to take Milano. AJ Epinesa comes screaming off the edge, free, and it forces an errant throw, and it leads to a turnover. So great design from Sean McDermott, great timing of the call, great execution. We'll let it run one more time here from the overall perspective. Again, good design, good execution. Okay, you can see the other end zone angle here, and then we'll let the other end zone angle run as we go to the next play here. Again, good design, creeper pressure, creates the free runner, heats up the quarterback. And like I said, like you dictating protection or taking advantage of protection rules, like they create this 2-on-1 on the outside because of this look and because of this pressure. It stresses protection rules and communication for offensive linemen and recognition from the quarterback pre-snap in terms of identifying the front, if there's going to be a free runner, if it's a non-traditional rush, who's coming, whose man is the quarterback's, what are my hot routes, what are my reads, if there is pressure, who am I checking it down to? And in this situation, the Bills can kind of bait you into taking that look like they do to Sam Howell. Like Sam Howell's outlet here is Antonio Gibson. So when he sees Epinesa, he looks and he's like, oh, let me hit my outlet. Hyde knows that, which is why he screams down and jumps it and makes the pick, especially knowing the down and distance. It's 3rd and 1. Like you want to get the stop. Maybe he slow plays it a little more if it's 3rd and 10 because he knows that he's got a bigger buffer in terms of the yardage. But great heady play by Hyde, but it's all set up because of that dictation piece and taking advantage up front with that creeper pressure. So again, only a 4-man rush. You still have the 7 in coverage because Leonard Floyd drops out, but you create a free runner and a nice piece. In that category, again, later in the game. So now this one, we talked about a creeper pressure. This one now is a simulated pressure because you have this pressure look. Look at everything you've got up front. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the line, showing a 6-man pressure. Heavy pressure look. You got guys in the A gaps. Everybody's covered. It's like, okay, what's going on? What are we going to do for the offense? Watch on the snap. Okay, here's your 2 linebackers, Milano and Bernard. This is something Sean McDermott did a ton of in Carolina. He did it a little bit early as, head coach of the Bills and then sprinkled throughout, Leslie Frazier's tenure as well. But this is something very heavy in Carolina. Luke Kuechly, Shaq Thompson, Thomas Davis, mugging those A gaps, showing this kind of pressure, sugaring the A gap as it's referred to, showing it and then dropping out, playing games with quarterbacks, showing it and then faking dropping out and then coming back in. Just all the different kind of games that you can do against an offensive line. But watch. So again, here is everyone from Epinesa to Shaq Lawson on the other edge. Watch on the snap. What happens? AJ Epinesa drops out. Again, let's go back. Here's AJ Epinesa. Here's Matt Milano. Sorry, I mugged the hell out of Matt Milano. Here's Matt Milano. Milano is going to rush. Epinesa is going to drop. So this one, again, is now a simulated pressure because you have showed pressure. You're showing a pressure look, but you're only rushing 4, but you've now brought a non-traditional rusher and a linebacker in Matt Milano, and you have dropped a traditional rusher in an edge player, AJ Epinesa, into coverage. What I also like about Milano, watch how he kind of fakes the dropout and then goes forward, kind of stops, kind of gives himself that angle so he doesn't necessarily fake the drop-off or fake like he's dropping into coverage, but he alters his angle a bit so he can get around Jordan Phillips, creates almost like a little twist action there, and then AJ Epinesa is dropping. So again, 4-man rush, simulated pressure. This is the AJ Epinesa interception. That's a pick 6. Here's Epinesa in coverage. Again, he is an edge player. He is not a coverage player. What's tremendous on this, again, he makes the athletic play and the interception for a touchdown, which we're going to show, but watch, he scans right here. Look at him ID. He IDs the drag route. He IDs that. He sees how we'll start to run, and the first thing that he does is see, okay, who's coming into my zone? He's not just blindly dropping to cover grass. This is a really heady, good coverage play from a non-coverage player. So I know the selling point for this play, and rightfully so, is him jumping into the air, making the interception, housing it, pick 6, points for the defense. That's tremendous play. But watch him ID. Okay, he's dropping. He's watching Sam Howell. Bang. He IDs it. This is what makes him come up. So Howell runs, but he's also coming up because he's looking to close down on that route underneath. Comes through. Howell starts to flatten. He even starts to break down. You see how he doesn't just willy-nilly just like, oh, let me just speed through and just run past that underneath route. He's trying to live in between. He's trying to cover that route, but also understands that he is the one who has to stop Howell from getting this first down with his legs because there is all this space. It's on him. So he's trying to cover down on this route while at the same time influencing Howell. So as he comes forward, look at him break down, so he doesn't just completely bail on the route and let Howell just kind of drop a floater or a teardrop over him. He breaks down a little bit, makes him hesitate, and then he gets into the air. And then he makes a ridiculous play on the ball and houses it. Now we'll show it in real time again. 6 at the line, boom, Milano comes, Epinesa drops out, diagnoses it, ball up, pick, pushes Sam Howell very disrespectfully, insubordinate and churlish from AJ Epinesa. Just a great play. End zone angle, boom, drops out. Here he comes again, breaks down, trying to live in the light and the dark, cover down on that route, but also influence the QB, gets his hands up, super athletic play. This is a really great too. Watch him just get out of here. And then Oliver finishes him. Great play. We'll show it one more time in real time, real motion. Really great piece. Really, really, really great piece. And now let's go to got one more in this family and then a couple plays for one other player. And it's just a great play from AJ Epinesa. Chuck and Howell. Touchdown. Good blocking downfield. Good job. Now, this one. So this is a traditional 6-man pressure. This is a traditional blitz. This isn't a simulated. This isn't a creeper. I just really like the design of this play. This is a shout out to Terrel Bernard a bit as well, but this is really just the design and the scheme of it all. Sack for Terrel Bernard. So on the surface, it's, wow, that's a really great play from Terrel Bernard. And it is, again, like I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite pieces from him was his blitzing. He's a very good blitzer. And part of the reason he's a good blitzer, like I mentioned, he comes forward like a heat-seeking missile. He comes forward fast, violent, and with purpose. But he also has good timing and good routes to the quarterback. So let's watch how this blitz develops. And this is 6-on-6 again. So you've got the 5 offensive linemen and you've got the running back versus the 4 down linemen for the Bills and the 2 linebackers for the Bills. So you got 6-on-6. Even numbers. Should be fine. Body on a body. That means somebody either has to win one-on-one for the defense or you have to somehow create a 1-on-2 for the defense and create a free runner, which is what happens on this play. So watch as we go forward. Milano shoots and then takes on the running back. The big play on this one, and it's the one that's going to go unnoticed, watch Ed Oliver right here. Watch how he spikes inside. Boom. What happens? Similar to what Greg Rousseau did on the first creeper pressure that we showed where he occupied the guard in the center. Here's Ed Oliver occupying the guard in the center. Matt Milano occupying the running back. So what does that mean? Terrel Bernard is free to the quarterback. But the route that I just traced, that's a huge selling point here with Terrel Bernard. Watch the route that he takes to the quarterback. It is tight to the block. He is hugging this block right here. He doesn't get out too far and then have to round things. He doesn't widen himself too much and have to like shuffle his feet and get back. He takes an efficient angle, similar to if you ever played baseball, you know how you're supposed to kind of widen out a little bit and you want to hit that first base or third base at that right angle, at that right spot to maintain as smooth of a transition on the base path as you can to go from one base to another, whether first to second or third to home. Watch the angle that he takes. Tight. He's hugging it. It's an efficient angle. He never has to break stride. Watch Bernard come through the hole. He never breaks stride. It is one smooth run. It's quick. He's got a good gait. He doesn't have to shuffle his feet. He doesn't have to cut. It's smooth. Right to Sam Howell. Right down on the quarterback. That's a kudos to Terrel Bernard. His timing of it, again, watch it from the beginning. The timing and the angle and the pace, that's a great job by Terrel Bernard. But the design is solid. The timing of it from Milano as well. And then the unselfish play from Oliver to, again, occupy the guard and the tackle, because that's what makes it work. That's what makes it work. He occupies the guard and the tackle. Milano comes here on the running back, and then Bernard is going to fit all the way around. Because it's 6-on-6. It's even numbers. You got a body for a body. You have the opportunity to put a hat on a hat. But because of what Oliver does, it puts Washington one man down, and that allows Terrel Bernard to be the free runner. Boom. Occupied. 4 for Washington, 3 for the Bills, which means that other guy coming from the second level, i.e. Terrel Bernard, has a free run, and that's how we get the sack. Great design, great call. This is also an example of everybody doing like the quote-unquote Sean McDermott 1/11th. This play doesn't happen if Ed Oliver doesn't do his job, if Matt Milano doesn't do his job. Terrel Bernard has to do his job, but Bernard can't do his job if they don't execute on the rest of the front and in the rest of that blitz. So a really good piece there that I liked as well. So highlighting Ed Oliver on that play, I want to continue to highlight Ed Oliver, who, talked about it with JP. It was one of the first pieces JP mentioned earlier in the show, talking about how the Bills interior has to have a strong game against Miami and how good Ed Oliver has been to start this year for the Buffalo Bills. Again, I think it's no secret how a lot of Bills fans felt when he got that contract. It was really kind of like a, really? I think for a lot of people. And instead, he's come out this year and has absolutely balled out on the interior against the pass and against the run. I'm going to show this pass here, or this rep here, from a passer standpoint. Going to show it from the sideline angle and then from an end zone angle. Just absolutely toying with a guard. Boom. Runs through him. Sack. Effortless. Again, show it. Comes off the line. Hesitation. Right through his chest. Bang. Knocks him back. Sack. Show it from the end zone angle. This is a dominant rep. Here's Ed Oliver. 2-point stance, which is fun. Lined up almost in a 4-eye. Like he's usually lined up more. Here's your 0, here's your 2. He's usually lined up more closer to the outside shoulder of the guard. He's lined up on the inside shoulder of the tackle. So he's more of a 4-eye. This is a wide alignment for Ed Oliver here. Gives him a little more space to work with. He's in that 2-point stance. Again, comes out. Hesitation, bang. Puts his head down, right into the chest, knock back, keeps himself free, and gets the sack. Show it in real time for you. And then we'll go to the other end zone angle just to get another appreciation for it. Whew. Real good. Let's go to the other end zone angle. There's that Oliver again, Mr. Number 91. For those of you playing at home, I'll circle him right there. And this is where you can really see the hand placement of the piece. Again, hesitation, almost like a little crossover step, like he's playing ball. Drops, bang. Look at the leverage. Look at the chest. Or look at the hands into the chest of the guard. Look at the extension. He's knocked back. This guard is in a bad way. So now this guard's only hope is to try and anchor and stalemate at Oliver. He cannot. His hands are flying. Again, look at what happens to the guard. Like, he can't even keep his hands onto Oliver. His hands are completely off. It's easy to see because he's got the white glove. Like, his left hand is in front of his face. Like, there's no contact there. There's no strength. There's no leverage. There's no attempt to really anchor. Like, you're done. He is flailing, and Oliver has him flail and then goes into him again, works through that shoulder, bang, gets the sack onto Sam Howell. Another one from Ed Oliver. Again, another example of selfless play from Ed Oliver. I'm going to go straight to not this end zone angle, this end zone angle. So, this is a tackle for Terrel Bernard, and on the surface, it's like, man, another good play from Bernard. Watch the play from Mr. Ed Oliver. Oliver and Daquan Jones had themselves a game in this one, just like they did against the Raiders, just like they'll need to against Miami. Again, you have to control that interior. You have to steal gaps. You have to win one-on-ones. You have to figure out how to get penetration and pressure Tua and bring him down, but you also have to win against the run. And Ed Oliver, his ability to win against the run individually, but also as a supporting piece for others, has been huge. Watch how he works on the double team on this one. We broke down in the film room last week how he'll drop that knee. Watch him drop the knee. He anchors. Bit of a different piece here. He doesn't necessarily reduce the service angle, kind of gets turned and mauled a little bit, but he still has the strength to stay strong at the point of attack. He just gums up everything here. It doesn't have to be the prettiest. It doesn't have to be a stack and shed or quick penetration or, blow somebody up. Sometimes it's just muddying the read for the running back, clogging up the middle, gumming up the works, just making life hard on the offensive line. That's what he does on this one. And look what it leads to. He gums up this whole thing. Bernard sees the flash of color here, also sees what's going on here, scrapes over the top, and gets Bernard the opportunity to fill and help make the play. Daquan Jones also helps make a play here too. I'm going to show it from this angle. I also want to give some love to some other supporting pieces on this one. Watch Greg Rousseau box in against one puller, and watch Taron Johnson, who me and JP talked about earlier, or JP and I talked about, watch him box in against the tight end pulling. This is nice. Here comes Rousseau. Bang. Outside shoulder on inside shoulder. Boxed in. Here comes Taron Johnson from the second level. Bang. Outside shoulder. Boxed in. Robinson has to go here. He has to go. He has been funneled to Bernard from Taron Johnson and from Greg Rousseau. But again, the reason Bernard can scrape and come through is because of what Ed Oliver does against the guard and the tackle. He prevents that double team from climbing to Bernard and getting a piece of him, and Bernard just fills. And then Ed Oliver also, again, just Bernard fills. Oliver also, look at how he pops up and just rips through right here. Kind of like the Undertaker, like popping out of the casket at the end of a pay-per-view. Watch him just bang, rips right through, splits the double team, widens, gets himself some space so he can get through, ends up making a play on the ball. Tremendous. Ed Oliver has been an absolute stud overall versus the run, versus the pass for the Buffalo Bills this year. This last play from Ed Oliver also ties into a Daquan Jones play as well. Let's watch the play here on the goal line. It is 3rd and 1. Should be advantage offense, right? All you got to do is mash this thing. Maybe they should have gone with a tush push here if they felt comfortable with it. That seems to be the most unstoppable play in football, but they don't. They run a traditional play. Sam Howell is in gun with Brian Robinson next to him. You've got to win up front when you're on the goal line, offensively or defensively. The Bills win up front big time because of Oliver and Daquan Jones and how they just gum up the entirety of the interior here, which allows Matt Milano to knife in and come make a play. So here's Daquan Jones. Here's Ed Oliver, the two protagonists of our story here. And just watch. I love the quickness on the snap. Daquan Jones slants inside. And again, he's already in his movement as the ball is snapped. So that's a good get off from Mr. Daquan Jones. Slants inside, bang. He and Ed Oliver, now this is not great. Like they're both in the wrong, like the same gap. So now you have the opportunity to like, you're in trouble. But because of what they're doing on the back end, so again, he's going to go here. So Milano is going to go here. You run a little gap exchange there. Milano shifts over the top. This looks bad at this point. Helmet to helmet, you're like, these two collided. They're in the same gap. This is a problem. Watch. They push through. What also helps is Milano's timing. Milano knifing through makes this man have to peel off and try and pick up Milano. So it reduces the 3-on-2 to a 2-on-2, and it's a 1-on, which means it's a 1-on-1 for Ed and Daquan, and they both just run through and end up making the play. So it's good team defense from Milano, Daquan, and Ed Oliver. Keep playing it in fast motion for everybody. So again, Milano doing this helps box this in a little bit and force the run back to Oliver and Daquan. And again, Milano knifing in helps pull that center off of Daquan Jones and turn the 3-on-2 into just a 2-on-2. But that's good defense from the interior. Watch Ed, watch Daquan, chaos. They get pushed. They create displacement for the defense. They reestablish the line of scrimmage. They knock their men into the backfield. Again, this ball is on the 1-yard line. So here's the line. Okay. And watch where Daquan and Ed knock their men back to. Boom. Their heels are on the 3-yard line. They've effectively changed about a yard to 2 yards of the line of scrimmage and knocked back. And then again, Milano dips. Really good play from Matt Milano. Like the bend and the knifing. Watch Milano here dip underneath Oof, avoids that shoulder. He dips, he leans, but then he pops back in. So again, he boxes that in, forces it back to his help, and then Ed and Daquan are just absolutely crushing the rest of that interior and helps make that play. Real good job. Real good job for the Bills defense on that one. So that is some of the stock up pieces from a film perspective. There's others. I mean, there's a multitude of players who had a great game in week 3 against the Commanders, offensively, defensively. Those are the pieces I wanted to highlight really from a schematic standpoint with the tape, just from what they meant. And again, what I wanted to break down, because I don't think simulated pressures get talked about enough. Creeper pressures don't get talked about enough. You'll see people throw out the terminology, but they don't really know what they are or explain what they are and why they're such a big schematic piece and why it's so nice. So I love this comment here. Daquan always makes a huge impact when he's in. Yeah, and he's a big loss when he's not. Again, we talked about it so much. I think everybody really understood his value in that game against Cincinnati in the playoffs when he wasn't in there. So that's fair for how important Daquan is. So those are, again, tons of stock up pieces after this game. Didn't want to harp on, if we did a true stock up for everybody, we would be here for forever because so many people had a good game. I mentioned earlier, so this is the one, again, there's some stock down pieces, but the one I really wanted to drill home, that, yards after contact piece for the Bills defense. I'm pulling it up in my notes right now. The Bills defense, again, is giving up 4.7 yards after contact per rush attempt. That is the most in the league. The Broncos are second at 3.4 yards after contact per rush attempt. And it's been basically just week 2 was better. But week 1 and week 3 were rough. So in week 1 against the Jets, the Bills gave up 4.9 yards after contact per attempt. Week 2 versus Vegas, 2.2 yards after contact per attempt. Week 3 versus Washington, 7.1 yards after contact per attempt. Started in the third quarter when Brian Robinson started to reel off some runs. Antonio Gibson reeled off some runs. Broken tackles, some ankle tackles, some, missing with shoulders, not wrapping up, not getting guys down to the ground. That cannot fly against Miami, like JP mentioned earlier when we were speaking out the matchups of Bills Dolphins. Raheem Mostert's contact balance is better than he gets credit for because he is a speed merchant, but that's really all that gets talked about for him. Devon Achane is also a speed merchant. You've got 2 running backs who run in the 4.3s or low 4.4s. So it's understandable that you talk about their speed, but Devon Achane is also better when it comes to contact balance and running toughness than he gets credit for. You cannot afford to miss tackles against Mostert and against Achane. Because again, if you miss a tackle, especially in the open field, a 5 or a 6 yard gain doesn't just turn into a 10 or a 12 yard gain. It turns into a 20 yard gain, or it can turn into a house call. And then again, especially with that other piece of what you're doing in the passing game, you don't want to miss a tackle on Jalen Waddle. You don't want to miss a tackle on Tyreek Hill. Miami put up all those numbers and points against Denver. Denver also played terribly, but that's a whole other conversation. Jalen Waddle didn't play in the game against the Denver Broncos because of a concussion. He looks to be back for this game. You've just got players and pieces that individually you can't afford to miss tackles with or miss tackles on, but then you add in the schematic advantage that Mike McDaniel creates and the leverage and the spacing and the concepts and all of this. Like the Miami offense is just built to punish you for any hesitation, to punish you for any mistake. And that type of the missed tackle piece, the yards after contact piece cannot continue. Again, like I mentioned last year in week 15 against Miami, when they ran for 188 yards versus the Bills. The Bills averaged 5.6 yards after contact per rush against the Dolphins. I should say the Dolphins averaged that against the Bills defense. That was the most in the league that week. The Raiders were second at 4.5. So over a full yard more after contact per rush for the Dolphins running game against the Bills than what the Raiders opponent had that week. That's bad. And then the Bills defense, 23.8% broken tackle plus missed tackle percent per attempted tackles in that game, which was most in the league. And then Miami had a positive 0.36 EPA per rush in week 15 against the Bills. That was highest in the league that week. And for reference, the Lions led the NFL in EPA per rush last year at 0.09. So 0.09 on the year, Lions led the league in EPA per rush. Miami had 0.36. So a 0.27 point difference, which is huge from an EPA, per attempt standpoint. So Miami got some things rolling on the ground. Bill's got to tackle better. Bill's been flying around. Again, part of it is the aggressive style of their defense. They are trying to fly around. They're trying to make plays. They are coming down and closing down on receivers. They are penetrating. Again, they're playing more aggressive. They're playing faster. They are playing freer. They're playing faster physically and mentally because of how Sean McDermott has curated this defense. So when you play that fast and you're flying around on the football field, it'll happen from time to time that you're going to miss some tackles. That's understandable. So I'm not expecting the Bills to have a zero, missed tackle percentage or broken tackle percentage in this game. It's going to happen at some point. Some guys are going to fall forward. Some guys are going to run through a shoulder, break out of an arm tackle, and make some plays. It's going to happen, but you got to tackle consistently. You cannot afford, really in any week, tackling. It's a big thing for me with, I think a lot of it stems from the lack of physicality you have in the offseason and training camp, the lack of padded practices and all the hitting that they do. I think tackling is kind of not necessarily fallen by the wayside in football, but I think tackling consistency has precipitously dropped over the years as practice and offseason habits have changed a bit from a structure and practice perspective once teams get together. So I think it's a larger conversation, but you can't afford to miss tackles really any week. But if you're playing a lesser opponent or you have a lead or an advantage, obviously there's some leeway, right? You have more of a margin for error. There is not that level of margin for error against the Miami Dolphins with what they have on offense, with how good they are schematically, play calling, and design, how good and how efficient and effective Tua is right now, the explosivity that they can generate underneath and vertically. That's such a huge piece, right? Like you saw the screen for Jalen Waddle against New England. Again, New England played Miami well, but add in some of that susceptibility to the screen game that the Bills have had. The Bills, have been vulnerable to screens each week this year. Missing a tackle on a screen to Waddle or Hill, or missing a tackle on an underneath route to Waddle or Hill, or missing a tackle on a run by Mostert or A-Chain or a screen to either one of them. That is how you kind of get into a spot where, again, a 4-yard gain or a 5-yard gain turns into 10, 15, or with Miami's speed, turns into a big chunk play or a big explosive play. Or you got somebody dead to rights and it's 3rd and 2 and you have them at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield, and all of a sudden they find a way to get 3 yards or they get 4 yards or they get 2 and they get that first down or make an easier 4th down situation. You have to be more efficient when it comes to that run game piece and that tackling piece. It'll kill you. It'll absolutely kill you. Beta Jim says, how much of the missed tackles has to do with the league changing how they want players to tackle over the years? That's, it's funny. I think that comment came in before I said what I said. Yeah, I think it ties into just, well, I think it's a different point that I made. I think it ties into the change in off-season preparation and practice times when teams come together. And then, I think it also either subconsciously or in the forefront of defenders' minds, like you can't really hit a guy here. You can't really do this. Like, I think, it's like the NFL has tried to take tackling out of football, even though it's such an integral part. So it's a very double-edged sword with how things have gone. I think all of it culminates in poor tackling for teams, and it seems like the Bills have been hit with a lot of that as well. Not necessarily because of the league, but just because of how they play, how they attack, and how they go forward. But then overall, the larger structure pieces affects that as well. And again, to tie into that running game piece, I wanted to end on, I love the conversation that myself and JP had. I really want to drill home on that Miami run game. 1st in yards after contact, 3rd in yards after contact per rush, 2nd in broken tackles, 2nd in missed tackles, 1st in broken tackles plus missed tackles forced per rush, 2nd in EPA per rush, 2nd in total EPA. They're cooking on the ground because of their speed and because of the schematics of their run game. What Mike McDaniel did with the Dolphins passing attack last year, he's started to do that with their run game this year, and it is paying dividends. They are a very lethal team on the ground to now go with how lethal they are in the pass. They are a problem. The Bills are going to have to be on their P's and Q's defensively and schematically to really slow down. Again, I don't think you're going to stop Miami. You just want to slow them down. But even doing that is a tall task. And I think the Dolphins defense has a similar piece as well against the Bills offense. The reason the Dolphins, like I said earlier, the reason the Dolphins are 2nd in EPA per rush and 2nd in total EPA on the ground is because the Bills are 1st in EPA per rush and 2nd in total EPA on the ground. And that goes along with how Josh Allen has been more efficient. You still know he's got that alien play capability within him. He can hit explosives. He can generate big plays with his legs and with his arms. But now you have a legitimate pivot and I think lethal piece in the ground game with what the Bills have found. So I think the ground game is going to factor big for both teams. For the Bills, it's more just keeping things on schedule and keeping things efficient and helping Josh Allen. On the Dolphins side, or on the Dolphins offense side with their run game, I think it's about the Bills trying to limit the explosives for the Dolphins run game and not letting the run game be just a slit throat opportunity like their pass game can be as well, because they can kill you quick. Like, it's not just a bleed you slow with the run game that some other teams have. It's a bleed you quick type of run game like their pass attack. And it's going to be intense. BTMS says, do you think Miami leans more into their run game than throwing game this year? I really think they're going to test it out early. I think McDaniel is going to come out with a script and kind of poke and prod and test the cage a little bit. He said coming into the season, they wanted to focus on the run game. They wanted to be better with the run. He's overall as a team, and they have been this year, you see the focus and the change schematically and the identity that they have. He said something similar to the week leading into the week 15 game with the Bills last year against Miami, where they committed more to the run and Mostert had a big day. That was also helped by a lot of poor tackling. So I think you're going to see early. I think you're going to see a lot of poking and prodding and trying to see what they can get. I think they're going to try and get out on the perimeter. I know Miami has been a big zone team, that inside zone team, and wide zone as well, or outside zone, I should say. I think they're going to try and live on the perimeter with some crack toss stuff, let Teron Armstead work. Like, a lot what they did against Denver is so appealing to them as a defense. You know, you're working in that fast motion and how you tie it into their passing concepts. It's a really complicated piece, but I think you'll see a variety of runs early for them to figure out where the Bills defense is vulnerable. And then we're going to see their, RPO passing attack and what they're going to do with the intermediate and the timing and how they generate explosives in that area. So again, I think you'll see the script. They're going to poke and prod early. You'll really see how they are leaning into things once I think quarter 2 hits, or maybe that's midway through the second or third drive for Miami, once they realize, hey, we have the baseline of what we think we can do here. Boom, let's start to attack and lean into things. So I think you really start to see less early in the game, but more as the game goes along, right in that second or third drive for Miami, when they really start to realize this is what we think we can win with. This is what we're going to lean into. And it's a tall task for both teams. This is a great game. This is one of the best games of the year, not just because of the two teams playing and the moment and all of those pieces, but schematically and how fun it can be from a matchup standpoint. Like, this is a really good football game from an X's and O's and schematic structure standpoint. And then you add in, Bills versus Dolphins, the history and the rivalry there, the rivalry that started to develop now, what happened last year, what's going on now. It's a really fun piece. This is going to be a really fun game and a really exciting game as a football fan. Obviously, if you're a Miami fan or a Bills fan, this game has more to it and you're going to be more excited for it or be operating with more trepidation towards it. But just as a football fan, this is a really exciting game. I'm super pumped and excited to see what happens schematically in this game. I know there's a lot that I could have potentially gotten into as well. I'll be getting into a lot of that on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro. Oh, excuse me. That's pro 2_ANT. I think I got hiccuped or breathed in at the same time. That was super weird. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. I'm going to be breaking down a lot more film stuff from who the Dolphins are and what they've been this year, and posting that up on Twitter and breaking some more things down. Just otherwise, these episodes would be like 20 hours long, and they're already very long. We've gone over 2 hours here. So follow me on Twitter for more content and breakdown when it comes to the Bills and just football stuff in general. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. I also realized with how everything went, with JP and then getting into the film stuff, I know this episode was a little less engagement based with the comments in the chat than it normally is. I apologize for that. If there was anything that you really, really wanted answered or had a question or thought, anything you wanted to get off your chest or question for me or something you want engagement for, follow me on Twitter, DM me, message me on Twitter, or leave it on YouTube in the comments. And I'll answer it there. Again, I sincerely apologize to anyone whose question I did not get to in any form or fashion with how everything went tonight. So I apologize for that. I do always like to make this as engaging as impossible. Oh, I'm falling apart. I always like to make this as engaging as possible. So I do apologize for that. Thank you to everyone who rode with me live here on this episode. And I appreciate all the kind words that are coming in from myself now as we go through. So thank you very much for appreciating the content. Please drop a like on this video, whether you're here live now or watching later. It goes a long way, sincerely, for myself and the entire team. And I know it's corny to ask for it, but please, 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 and thank you. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video. It means a lot and more than you know. Thank you very much to everybody who rolled with me live. If you did not roll with me live and you're watching this later or you're listening to this show on one of the podcasting apps or platforms. That is cool. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Ratings are super helpful. Reviews and feedback are tremendously helpful, as are the subscriptions. Please subscribe on YouTube to Disguise Coverage on the Cover One channel. Appreciate you folks so much. Again, if you rode with me live, if you didn't ride with me live and you're watching later, or you're watching live, or you're listening later, whatever have you, whatever form or fashion your support comes in, I'm tremendously grateful for and tremendously thankful for. So thank you very much for tuning in, however you tuned in. And for consuming the content. Thank you very much for the kind words throughout the entirety of the episode. Thank you very much for being so gracious in the live chat. To JP, who was phenomenal. Major thank you to Mr. JP Acosta for joining me on the show. Again, give him a follow on Twitter. I'm going to throw his handle out there one more time. His handle is Acosta 32 _ JP, ACOSTA 32 _ JP. He's a writer for SB Nation. Again, dude is really smart. Breaks down ball again for a variety of teams in a variety of ways. It'll help you be a better fan and know more about this game and learn this game. So give him a follow. Again, huge props and kudos to him for joining me and crushing it like I thought he would. This is a long episode, but it's understandable with how big this game is, how important this game is. Again, I appreciate you folks. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this show is. If you thought this show was terrible, that's fair. Try and tell your enemies about this show then and try and ruin their day with this show. I appreciate you folks. I appreciate JP. Big week, big game. Give me a follow on Twitter. We're going to be getting at more of this matchup and other stuff going forward throughout the rest of this week, falling apart. It's late. I appreciate you. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Join myself and Eric Turner live tomorrow night, Wednesday, September 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Cover One Film Room as we break down the entirety of Bills versus Commanders. And if you are watching Disguise Coverage now and it's after that Wednesday, go back and check the Cover One channel for the Cover One Film Room and watch myself and Eric Turner crush it. I appreciate you folks. Enjoy the rest of your night. Again, take care of one another. Be kind to one another. Godspeed. And as always,